He's trying way too hard to be Matt Walsh. Just doing the Matt Walsh shtick, except even worse and significantly more Italian. But yeah, that first prompt was a fun one.
How are you feeling after that experience?
Not enjoyable. The fact that we were all put in that position to debate violent hate speech is insane.
The third prompt was transgenderism should be eradicated from the planet.
The verbiage is to get clicks and to sell cigars and to sell ads. Does this man actually believe that? No, we have to remind the people out there, calm down. This man's just trying to sell some cigars. He wants a hot tub. He wants a pool.
I don't want to excuse it all though, because he very well might actually believe that.
Gay pride should be banned.
I just want to preface something because I know I went up there and I did agree a little bit. I don't think we should ban pride, but I do believe as a community we do need to rebrand because it's allowed people that are fetishizing certain sexual acts. Okay, we're gonna use the LGBT community to kind of hide under them for fetishes and stuff.
I understand what you mean by the rebrand, but we can't cherry pick.
But in the same way that we don't hold drunk straight people at hockey games out on the street or whatever it is, we don't hold them responsible.
You can take them to a drag story hour.
I don't agree with that though. I don't really like the whole drag reading to kids thing.
The term queer really is just an all-encompassing term for acceptance. Queer means to be different than.
Is there an objective line somewhere? And what does that look like?
People like us, we base what's right and wrong based off of, is it hurting someone else?
S&M is hurting someone, but there's consent.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right? Should we draw the line somewhere? That's my question to you.
I think you gotta draw the line somewhere.
I love diversity of thought. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it'd be so boring if we're all believe the same thing. We're yes, that's great.
Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah.
And this goes to Michael. If you're still watching, this is hours in, Michael. That's crazy that you're obsessed with us.
Girl, you need to go to bed.
But
I was reading Jackie Hilbert. I forgot what her name is, but she's a lesbian who's not lesbian anymore.
Not Jacqueline Hill. I know you're talking about. She has dreads.
Yes.
Great response. Yeah.
I was talking to my therapist.
Do you take clients?
You want my copay?
I know, right?
I wanted to go back to the gay frogs thing because I had so much to say on that. If the study's true, it could explain why men could be gay, but it still doesn't explain why women could be gay.
I think if you just look at a man, you can understand why women are gay.
Valid. No
offense, you guys. We love you.
But agreed.
Sorry. The fact that we even engaged with him made me sad. Queer people need to be annihilated that's not a debate.
It was completely void of compassion or kindness or understanding.
Even when he was looking me in the eye, he wasn't looking at me.
It was a performance.
It was a performance.
Yes.
Yeah.
I honestly was over it as soon as I sat down. I was like, he's clearly not here in good faith.
I feel like it was so beneath what we deserve, and I don't like that that's the position that we were put in as a group.
You in a church and you preaching. Come on, man.
Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Gilbert Gonzalez Jr. here, and we are here with a very special video.
Real quick, if you are new here, please take a moment to head over to that subscribe button and smash the bajangles out of it. And ring the bell so that you can get notified the next time I drop another exciting video just like this one.
So odds are you probably just watched the brand new Surrounded that just dropped on Jubilee, where it was 1 conservative versus 25 LGBTQ activists. Surrounded, new episode, coming at ya. And the conservative was Michael Knowles. Well, a lot of us didn't get our say, so we are here today with some people who got to tell him what they thought, and also some people who didn't quite get the chance, but they're gonna get their chance now today. So we're gonna go around the room real quick. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're from, and one cool thing about you.
Hello, my name is Scarlett. I am from Ohio, but I now live here in Los Angeles, California. I would say the coolest thing about me is, this is a hard one. Honestly, I don't know.
You're just you. You're fierce.
Great fashion.
There we go. Great fashion.
She's in fashion.
Yes, she is.
I'm Ben. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I moved here about 8 years ago, and I am a cat dad. I have 3 cats.
Hi, I'm Lex. I use she, they pronouns. I am from Issaquah, Washington. Shout out, Eagles. And one cool thing about me is that I like to scuba dive. That's my cool fact.
Hi, I'm Stassi. I am from Beaumont, California. I think a cool fact would be that I used to do musical theater for years. So, yeah, that is cool.
Hi, my name's Caitlin. I'm originally from South Carolina. However, I did just move to California. And my fun fact is that I road tripped all the states, obviously except for Alaska and Hawaii, by myself. So that was really fun. Yeah. If you need any travel tips, let me know.
Why did you not drive to Hawaii? Do you not like it?
That's like racist.
That's between me and Hawaii. So.
All right, hi. My name's Destiny. I've lived in LA my whole life, so grew up and raised here. And fun fact about me, I grew up doing martial arts, and I really love boxing now, so.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
So everybody be nice to her.
I'll be your bodyguard. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm Mason. I'm from the IE. Shout out, bless the bottle. And also, I've lived in 8 other states, so I'm well-traveled, I guess you could say.
Oh, cool beans. And we do have next our very special guest joining us via Zoom, the one and only Cade.
Indeed.
Sounds like okay.
Thanks for having me. A lot of people know me online as GayXTrad, and fun fact about me, I like to run 100-mile races, so that's always fun.
Wow. 100 mile? That's like Forrest Gump stuff.
No, that's like masochism, I feel.
Yeah. We're going to go over the claims. So as you saw, Michael said some outrageous claims. So we're going to break them down. We're going to say each one what we enjoyed saying, what we didn't get to say. But before we get into that, I want to just open the floor and let all of you process out loud. How are you feeling based off of what we all just experienced in that room? Where are you emotionally after that experience?
I am not feeling good.
Talk to us about it.
I mean, I think we all kind of collectively agreed that the initial emotions after filming were not enjoyable. I think looking back, the fact that we were all put in that position to debate violent hate speech, I think is a little insane. I think the fact that we even engaged with him made me sad because, like, a debate is like, should we tax the church or not? Sorry, whoa, we're in a church. But like that's a debate thing, right? Saying like queer people need to be annihilated that's not a debate. Like, and to say that to a room of queer people and then to watch all of us like try and argue with him whether or not we exist or like our marriages exist is just, I feel like it was so beneath what we deserve. And I don't like that that's the position that we were put in as a group.
Well, I feel like it wasn't even a debate. Like
No.
there was no persuading. And so I was just a little jarred by, it almost felt fake. Like I felt like it was almost like, performative. It almost didn't feel real. So it was just odd.
Yeah.
Like it was hard for me to have a normal conversation when you're saying something like gay marriage isn't real. It just is, it's like, what? I didn't get it.
Yeah, I was like, why is Jubilee giving this man a platform? And it was from the beginning, it was just bizarre when he walked on and they're like, okay, give us your intro. And he's like, hey, I sell cigars and blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, so what are we doing here right now?
It's giving like cartoon
Yeah.
used car salesman.
It's very much like he was here to perform his shtick, to get his clicks and his viewers engaged, to gain more viewers and sell cigars. It was very bizarre. Very bizarre to me. I didn't feel like he was actually maybe really like wholeheartedly believe those things, but the fact that he was saying them, it was like he was trying to sell stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And that's typically like the format of the Surroundeds is it's not more of like a actual engaging dialogue. It's really just like who can throw out the biggest quips, who can punch the hardest, and then go sit down. So I think it's kind of like people's motivations coming into it. When they label the ad, for some people who applied as like LGBTQ activists, they're intending on going on, being able to advocate for marginalized people, really educate a section of the internet that might not know about queer issues. And I think that that's not what's in reality with Surrounded. So I think some people came in ready to kind of get in the mud and ready to wrestle. And that's really what it incentivizes. You know, it really sucks about that. I think it's like a very specific part of a conversation of making someone look dumb for their audience to try to get them to stop listening to their stuff.
But they have had ones that I feel like were more constructive. Like I watched the like 25 Christians versus one atheist. Sorry, I'm really just
that was
church.
amazing.
You guys, I am a confirmed Catholic, okay? But I watched that one, and that one like was constructive and was an interesting dialogue, and I feel like was more or less respectful.
Yeah. I think Alex is a really good communicator.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, right? Even if you look at a lot of the other ones, even like the cop versus criminals, that was very rage baity with like, I'm going to come on here and advocate for the police, where people who have been completely uprooted by law enforcement had to give their testimony. Like, that's not something that's going to be a productive round or conversation. Or even like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, shout out my boys. It's just one of those things where I really think they're coming on to like own a bunch of 25 triggered libs, and it's really up to like the individual libs or whatever to fight back. It really does suck, especially for people who aren't ready for those conversations, because you're just kind of bullied literally for like 2 minutes on end. So it's a weird format for sure. And I think it'd be cooler if everyone brought their own claims and they had to defend their claims in the middle.
Yeah.
Like it's really incentivizing the audience to be like, oh, poor Michael, he has to be confronted by 25 people. You know what I mean?
The very setup is like, oh, he's the minority and he's surrounded by a bunch of hyenas, you know?
Yeah, the professional communicator who has millions of
Against
subscribers.
a bunch of
25 people.
Pedestrians.
I think that was kind of the point. He wanted to make himself seem smart in front of a bunch of people that were uneducated or crazy or whatever the terms he wanted to use. So it was just kind of bizarre to watch the whole thing play out, I think.
Yeah, I think also like that man did not come there in good faith.
No.
A debate infers that there's going to be like a conversation that builds on factual evidence, and like he just got up there and said violent rhetoric.
It was completely void of like compassion or kindness or understanding or I felt very uncomfortable. Like I was sitting there shaking like when Stassi was talking to him, because I was like, he is speaking to her as if she's just not even a human.
I wanted to throw my shoe at his head so bad.
That's why it was easy to not like take it. Like it just was blowing off of me, because like even when he was looking me in the eye, like he wasn't looking at me. Like it wasn't.
It was a performance.
It was a performance.
Yes.
Yeah. Like at one point, his like eye twitched, and I saw a little bit.
You're like,
of,
are you in there?
I was
Blink
like,
twice.
oh hi. But it was sitting there for him to come at me during like how it all happened was a lot for sure.
I think it's also just like I had so much like secondhand rage for you because to watch you, and you did it so well, but to watch you like sit there and debate with someone that was like denying your personhood and denying your humanity is so beneath what you are deserving of. And like, again, the way my shoe almost came off my foot.
I think though that's what he was. I think I felt like I could be up there and like have a conversation, because I knew he was doing it to everyone. It just came out in a weird way. With, like as I was sitting up there, I don't really remember like what was said. I just remember like little bits and pieces, and it was just uncomfortable.
Well, to refresh you, I don't know what they'll include, but you were very assertive but calm.
Yeah, you were.
Really impressive.
I was banging my hand. I thought that
you were like moving, but like even your tone and your rhetoric was very much like, shut the hell up. Like I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna tell you. It wasn't like an erratic, like outrageous, dramatic performance.
I'll never get over him being like, you're gonna yourself, and you just laughing at
you're
him.
like, no, I'm happy. I'm okay. I'm like really okay.
It was like, just a lot. Like I don't know how you're supposed to respond in a moment like that. I think it was just kind of like to me, it's like when somebody is so headstrong in their beliefs like that, to a certain point, I'm like, there's no point in even me having a conversation, which is why I just was like, hi, get me out, please. Because somebody else needed to take over for the conversation.
Yeah.
It was especially crazy too because you're like 1 year in, right? And I'm 7.
Yeah.
And Blossom is even more than us.
Yeah.
So it's like, when are we supposed to ourselves? I'm waiting.
Yeah. No, for real.
Never.
Honestly, I get what you guys are saying. I feel like I'm thankful to Jubilee for the opportunity because it's an amazing show, but I just feel like we're trying to prove our existence to someone, and that kind of takes a lot. And I feel like just kind of hearing the claims for the first time right there and then having to jump in and explain okay, how do I explain my existence in 30 seconds? It's kind of complicated, especially when you're right. Someone is so firm in their beliefs, it's kind of hard to change your mind in 30 seconds. You can't. So you kind of have to have at least a little bit of information that you have a coherent thought. So that way the other audience, the people watching like myself, the fans, they kind of get a better idea of oh, this is what the community is about, because if you just hear it from Michael Knowles' perspective, obviously you're going to be like, oh, these are just a bunch of sinners or some but yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cuss.
It's especially hard to vocal yourself and explain yourself when he derails every single thing you're talking about too. It's you're not even getting a full picture of anything when you're changing the topic instantly.
Yeah, and at some point he even made a joke. He was just being very dehumanizing to every claim. He was laughing at points. It's just there was no real discussion that he was trying to have. He was doing it even when he was picking who he wanted to talk to. At that one point, he was like, I want to do this conversation, but let's do this. It's going to get more views. He
feels like a populace.
Yeah.
He'll just do whatever people want to hear. People want, this topic's popular. Let's go with it.
A dancing monkey, if you will.
And then the last
Gets
thing
ads
that
paid.
we didn't do. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about
Yeah,
that.
we can talk about whatever.
Oh yeah.
I can't even believe.
I was ready. It was contraception shouldn't be real, but only 3 people wanted to talk about it. I was like, this is the easiest thing.
Yeah.
Are you serious? He just thinks that sex is only for procreation, which is I feel so bad for his partner.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a sadness under all of the mental armor he had. There, I saw a lot of repressed projection on us from his own sadness.
I personally don't think he actually follows through with what he says.
I agree.
think it's really just a caricature of what he thinks his audience is looking for.
100%.
And you see that a lot with incel men or even people who are very trad. It's I need to put on this performative persona and then I'm going to do what my actual desire is in the free time. It's why Grindr crashes at the RNC is because people are repressive of how they actually are. And
No, because let's talk about it. The amount of times that man said leather daddies. I need them to someone, hello, internet. If you hear me now, please clip his quotes and just give us a montage of every single time he said leather daddies.
I hope they include it.
Can I jump in for a second here?
Yes, please. I was actually going to segue into you because Cade really took him to task on that first claim. But Cade, how are you feeling right now, like we all are, having just experienced this being with Michael?
I think the actual debate experience, it was quite the adrenaline rush on my end. I think it was a despicable debate, but I think above all it was incredibly boring in that his particular claims are these arguments that I've heard a million times in philosophy classes from this Thomistic view of the world, which is this super niche philosophical school of thought when it comes to sexual ethics. And when he walked in the room, I was like, we're about to be in for just wild claims made without assertions. And for him to pull out the first claim of gay marriage can't exist, I was like, okay, now we're back into our Thomas Aquinas or theology of the body class in college, which is this essentially just boring, asinine, outdated philosophy. And all he's doing is making this technical argument that marriage is this particular definition somewhere out there in the ether. And so even if we pass laws that allow for gay marriage, even if society affirms gay marriage, it does not matter. Marriage is this ethereal thing in his mind in the Platonic world of forms. For the general audience, I think it's confusing for most people. For him, it makes total sense because he has access to these divinely imbued meanings. And I was like, we are going to be in for a roller coaster. He's trying way too hard to be Matt Walsh. He's seen Matt Walsh's success at the Daily Wire and has been like, how can I copy Matt Walsh? And he's just doing the Matt Walsh shtick, except even worse and significantly more Italian. But yeah, that first prompt was a fun one because the question to respond to is according to who. And him and I just went, nuh-uh, yaha, for like 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, Kate, I'm curious what you think, because he said at the end of that argument, he was like, well, the government doesn't dictate what marriage is. He never said what dictated what marriage is. What do you think he would say? Like, dictates that?
God.
Yeah. I was waiting for him to say it. He never did.
Exactly. That's
like,
the conversation I
which
wanted to have.
God?
His Catholic God.
I know. So only your God?
I call it the Catholic two-step, which is a lot of Protestants, when they argue, just say like, oh, according to God or according to the Bible. Traditional Catholics have this like sneaky back-end way of saying like, it's not God, it's natural law, which is their philosophy, which is like, we can see these realities about the world that like being gay or that you can't ever use birth control just obvious according to the natural order, and we don't even need God to see it, is what they'll say, except it's mysterious how their philosophy that doesn't involve God magically lines up to their view of God and their catechism. So they try to do this two-step where they distract you with this natural law argument, but right behind it is God. And so they will never admit that it's God on the public-facing debates, but in the actual particular, like where they're learning this from the classroom, they open it in prayer and they talk about God and how God has built the natural order. And so they try to hide God behind it in this like media training type of way.
Yeah, natural law is so superior to positive law because people are the ones who create laws, and that's flawed because of human nature. But who's interpreting what natural law is? It's people at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So when you're saying only the church is able to interpret what God wants, it's like, okay, well, now we're still in people, just a smaller group of people instead of actual democracy.
Yeah.
Well, and which church? Because again, like, I mean, not to, apparently I'm on a church kick today. But like, if we're going to talk about Catholicism specifically, like him getting up there and making any kind of claim about contraception, to me as an Irish Catholic is crazy, because St. Bridget, the like patroness saint of Ireland, one of the miracles that she performed was an abortion on a nun. So like, let's talk about Catholicism, babe.
Yeah,
like, there's so many hypocrisies in it.
Historically, Catholics have had like pixel perfect sexual ethics for sure. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think also like, let's ask the Mormons, because like if man and wife, like if it's just man and wife, what about man and 6 wives?
That's what I wanted to get into, is like the evolution of like the purpose of marriage, and how, well, like with women, we don't necessarily even need it anymore for survival. So now we can start seeing it in a way of like a loving form, rather than just like, oh, this is this cool agreement that we have, that way I can stay alive. So I wanted to get more into that as well, because it kept seeming like he still saw it as this mutual agreement, that there was no love needed in it, and I really wanted to tap more into that. I just wanted to get him like a nice, clean definition of what he thought marriage was, and yeah, it just seemed like he leaned a little more on that side.
I'm willing to bet that if we had pushed him more on that, we would have gotten him to admit that he views women as property. Because essentially that's what marriage was a like declaration of ownership of a young woman.
not just young women too, but even just families like sharing property and wealth.
Paying
like,
dowries.
It was really just a property transfer at the end of the day. I kept trying to pin him down on that, and he just kept pivoting away.
Did a good job at that too. Yeah.
100%. Just to touch on what you said about the whole like having 6 wives, you know, what about child brides? You know, like in Iraq, they just passed, I think, like you can marry a girl that's 9 years old or something. It's like, that's straight, but is that ethical?
Yeah, that's more ethical than a loving gay marriage of 2 consensual adults. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just
on the note on child brides, according to Michael Knowles' catechism, which is like the belief of, or the book of his beliefs that he subscribes to, you only have to be 12 for women and 14 for boys to be able to be married, according to their own rules, and they haven't ever updated that. Now, it depends on which version of the book you look at, but if you were to press him, in the eyes of God, which is the only thing that matters in his worldview, you could get married at 12 and have child brides, and there's no issue from a church perspective, which is ironic with Catholic priests, but that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah, I really want to get into like the biblical history too, because even Mary, like most historians put her at the youngest being 12 when she gave birth to Jesus, and at the oldest being 15. So it's like if he would for sure outright say in that circle, no, nobody under the age of 18 should be having sex, but people who are two consenting adults, that is absolutely immoral. And then you see people like David and Jonathan. That's another thing I want to talk about in the Bible. Like when David literally says, I love you, Jonathan, more than my own soul. That is gay as hell. Like, how are you going to tell me that there's no queer love in the Bible?
They were roommates.
Yeah, they were roommates, exactly.
He says, your love for me is more wonderful than the love of women.
Yeah.
He said, I'll wear your clothes into battle, bro. That's gay.
Literally.
I also feel like Esther's fruity, but we can talk about that on some other video.
Actually, yeah,
I'm very fruity.
And Ruth and Naomi, I think it is. Yeah, Ruth and Naomi. That's where we get literally like till death do us part is from that lesbian couple.
And they were
the
roommates.
friends. Yeah,
And they were besties.
But Kate, one thing I wanted to ask you, since you're like so steeped in like Catholicism and you know all of the beliefs and that come with that, I wanted to ask Michael, like, if you're to be like Christ, be Christ-like, care for the poor, you know, in Luke it says like. Or no, was it Luke? I don't know. Somewhere in the Bible it says like the only religion that's deemed like true and pure is that you take care of orphans and widows. You have a whole group of gay parents who are 4 times more likely to adopt orphans and unhoused youth that would stay in an orphanage or, you know, go hungry. And you're going to tell those people and fight, you know, for those people not to be able to adopt children. Like that is the disconnect I see with like Christ's figure of being such a compassionate, loving person, and then this like Catholic gesturing of like, I don't know, whatever he believes.
When you talk to mainstream Christians, like the Charlie Kirks of the world, mainstream Christians in politics, they're going to point back to the Bible. They're going to base their philosophy and their theology off of biblical exegesis. But Michael Knowles and most Catholics are not essentially moored to the Bible, in that they argue they have the authority from God and they actually produce the Bible. And so what the church has is authority as like this governing body that can interpret God's will for the world. Even though you raise the great point of if we have religion, which is to say like let's care for the widowed and for the orphaned, let's lift up the downtrodden. You would think like, oh, that's a great biblical command. Like let's allow families to adopt kids, especially we know a lot of queer couples are much more likely to adopt kids later in life, which is a huge need in the foster care system. They're more likely to adopt children with special needs, unlike straight couples. So you'd think that would be great. But what they would argue is what's called an intrinsic evil. There's a set of prescriptions that are so evil you can't engage with them at all. You can't do any sort of like, hey, like they might be sinful, but like there's this huge upside. So things like contraception, any form. So you wear a condom as a married couple to prevent a pregnancy that would kill the wife. That's not allowed. Homosexuality, because it's intrinsically evil, can never be engaged with. And there's all of these laws, and that's why somebody like Mother Teresa, a Catholic, got in so much trouble, because even though she saw all of these people who were dying on the streets from overpopulation, she couldn't allow contraception. She couldn't teach that to alleviate poverty, or these moms that were having their bodies ravished by all of these unwanted pregnancies. And so this Catholic theology has this terrible issue, which is there are some issues they can't even engage on. Same thing with abortion. Even if there's a 12-year-old victim of rape, she can't have access to abortion health care and is mandated to carry this baby to term. And Catholics lift up these saints like Saint Gianna Molla, who essentially had cancer but was pregnant, and in order to not kill the child inside of her, she forewent cancer treatment and died in order to give birth to the child. And so Catholics can engage with so many of these moral issues because it doesn't matter how much good's out there. God said it's wrong, and we can't even begin to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
And see, what I'm saying is like all this religious jargon is keeping people at the end of the day from emulating Christ. And it said when Christ looked at the crowd, he felt compassion. And the word that in the Greek for compassion they use is splagnitzomai, which means like he felt it in his intestines, like in his guts. He felt like compassion, and he was moved to care for these people. And you have all these Pharisees around him like, well, what's the Mosaic law? What's the most important law? What's this law? What's that law? And Jesus is like, I'll give you a new law. Love others like you would love yourself, and love the Lord your God. He's like, I'm not going to get into all these laws that are keeping you from taking care of people and that have turned this temple into a place to sell your cigars, but I'm going to tell you a new law. Just care for people. That's what I would want to tell Mrs. Knowles.
Kate, I want to say that you really killed it during that very first claim when you debated him. I really liked seeing you in action. Was there anything that you did not get to say to Michael during that first claim that you wish you could have?
Not really. I mean, there are a lot of things to say. I think I could have done a much better job of first walking him into admitting that this all comes from natural law. Because as soon as I pulled out Aquinas and Aristotle, he looked at me with these kind of crazy look in his eyes like, oh, shit, the game's up. This kid knows where this is coming from. And then he tried to backtrack and do the, oh, why are you bringing up Aristotle? Where if you were to look up Michael Knowles, Latin Mass, you're going to see a whole lot of talks by him using these terms, natural law, talking about Aristotle, talking about the church. And so I could have done a better job of setting or walking him into his own trap, because all he did is deny. But there's these long podcasts out there where he's admitting what he didn't want to admit to in the actual debate. But I think that the central question is, according to who? Because, I mean, I got him to admit that, like, are there couples that are of the same sex that have the legal rights in the eyes of the state that society calls marriage? And he said, yes, but they're pretending, which is a pretty damning thing that, according to everybody with a brain, which I guess Michael Knowles doesn't have, according to everybody with a brain, gay marriage exists. And a lot of conservatives will be like, but it's not good. And like you can have a debate over the facts of gay marriage, but to say it doesn't exist, Michael's in a party of one. It's both him and God that are like, in our eyes, Michael and his God say that it doesn't exist, but according to every human out there, it does exist. And most conservatives say it exists, but like we have a problem with it. So he's kind of solo in his own camp there with him in Walsh over at the Daily Wire trying to convert Ben Shapiro.
I mean, he's not completely solo because since we filmed this video, Idaho as a state has motioned to overthrow the Supreme Court's ruling on gay marriage. So I would venture to guess, as someone working in politics, there's a chance that our right to marry who we want will be overturned by June, which is a really horrible thing to think about right now. But it's like we had this conversation with him, and then like I think within 12 hours of us filming, Idaho announced the decision to do this, and we all, I think, know how the Supreme Court is going to fall on that. So it's just like, we can have these debates, and the unfortunate thing is that right now our government is quite literally undergoing a coup, and people who think and act like that hateful man that we sat in a circle around are taking control of our democracy and taking our rights away. And it's like kind of juxtaposed by their voting base, which swore up and down, oh, he's not going to do that. Oh, they're not going to do that. They're not going to go after birth control. They're not going to go after gay marriage. And we're like watching them do all of those things. So a little bit of context.
Okay, let's go on to the next claim. Michael said, oh, sorry. You want to say something, Kate?
I was going to add one more thing here if I can.
Yes, of course.
I was going to say, Michael Knowles' argument of gay marriage can exist is the same thing that somebody like Amy Coney Barrett's going to believe. She's part of People of Praise, which is the charismatic branch of this same kind of traditional Catholic movement built off of this group from Steubenville. Michael Knowles and Coney Barrett, at the end of the day, are going to believe the same thing that Coney Barrett would say, that gay marriage can exist, even if there's a constitutional right for it, even if people say that it exists. Coney Barrett, if you nail her down, would admit to the same exact thing, that in principle it can't exist because God made it that way. To your earlier point that Michael Knowles isn't in the camp of one, that there are very traditional Catholics across government. Even Steve Bannon is part of this same group. Walsh is part of the same group. Supreme Court justices and J.D. Vance, and this way with the Dominicans is also connected into the same movement, would make these same arguments that it does not matter how much good is out there, even if it makes people's lives better, it definitely can't. With this dogmatic view of the world that's utterly unsupported, they're trying to take our rights away according to God. Like, these people are theocrats at the end of the day.
And they're going to hide behind like things like the Respect for Marriage Act that got passed in 2022, so it will protect it in certain states. And their argument will be, oh, it's just like Dobbs, so we're just going to send it back to the states to be able to decide instead of a national ruling. And all that really does is continue to inch their way towards removing it from everybody. Even if it doesn't happen all in one sweep, if you're able to take away people's intrinsic rights in one area, you're that much closer to continue doing that in a snowball effect. So it's just one weird thing where we can't let them do it anywhere. And sure, states' rights or whatever, but states' rights don't determine what human rights are. Like,
no, and we're watching them do this with contraception right now because they had the Dobbs decision, and like as of this week, Republicans have introduced a bill that would essentially ban abortion nationwide. So once they have the Supreme Court ruling in their favor, then they can introduce legislation to then strip the rights away from everyone in the country. Because if they make it a federal law, like that's just going to be a big legal debate that we're going to have to sit through. And unfortunately, it just puts marginalized people at risk even more. Which I just don't think Jesus would do.
Don't you love democracy?
Yeah.
And just 6 people being able to decide everything?
Yeah, that's wild.
Michael's next claim was LGBTQ identity is a social contagion. How did y'all feel about that? So I was talking to my sister. Was it my sister or my mom? I was talking to somebody about this. And they're like, what's a social contagion? And I was just like, basically, we're only gay because we want to be cool. Essentially. But, you know, I do like that when I called him out on that, he did kind of concede, right? Like, okay, actually, Kate, good point. Because at some point, there was a gay person before, you know, the original gay person or whatever. So I like that I checked him. So I was like, okay, wait, hold on. So you mean everybody's gay just because they want to be cool?
Well, and it's wild because if you know anything about anybody who's involved in the community, I would argue that maybe it's harder. It is. It's harder for us.
Sure.
Like, I feel that my identity has been such a hard part for me to come to terms with and to step into and accept. It's literally taken me years. It's not something that I think anybody would do knowingly, like thinking that it's going to make them cooler or fit in. It's weird because the social contagion, but then we're saying that it's a social contagion, but then we're all doing it to be cool. It didn't quite click with me.
How old are you, Stacey?
I'm 25.
Yeah, so I'm 33, and I grew up in the same kind of time period where it was like very hard to be gay. I didn't come out until I was like 23 or something like that. Yeah. It was very hard to be gay, but I see the roots of where his argument is coming from, where we had this huge, push with Obama and this huge cultural movement to like legalize gay marriage, and all of a sudden gay people are in all these movies, and all my family's conservative. The straight men in my family are like, I feel like no one just like cares about straight men anymore. Like I'm not getting any jobs because I'm a straight white man. I'm not getting this. All the commercials are like minorities, all this. So I see where they're coming from, where it's like, oh, if I'm just like queer baiting, I can get jobs, or like the Harry Styles queer baiting thing, where it's like, you wouldn't see that when I grew up. Like you wouldn't see people queer baiting to get more following, but I see where he's coming from,
I think though, like that also could just be the society opening itself up,
Yeah.
Like I came out initially as a gay man, but as I started, I've kind of been through it all. I just feel that the place that he was coming from kind of contradicts, because while I get the sentiment, like I understand like where he's coming from, it's just the most generic thing you could possibly say. Yes. Like there's no
statements were very generic,
absolutely,
and clickbaity.
The only reason why people are so drawn to have inclusivity is because of people like Michael, right? The reason why you're pushing to get more diverse thought, or we're caring so much about specific social identities, is because they're challenged by people that are hateful. And I wanted to tell him during the Pride talk, and I'm sure we'll get to that claim, but Pride only exists because of hateful people like you. There's a reason why you want to feel prideful about who you are. It's because you've been ostracized. It's like,
come on, Mason. You in a church and you preaching. Come on, Mason.
If you want pride to go away, then stop being a piece of shit.
Like, feel shame.
It's easy,
Like also depending on where like you live too. Yes, it's a lot more in media, but how people are reacting to it being in media is still not good. So like I heard it all the time, like, oh my God, why is there so many gay people on TV now? Like it was always still a bad thing. Like I moved out of the state just to get out of that mindset. It's just so, and I feel like I'm pretty young and people are still acting like that. So it's just like, yeah, you see more of it, but you also hear more comments like that too still. So
I do think that there is a tie here between people like Michael's social views and their economic views as well, and political ideologies. if we look back through history, every single fascist regime that has taken over, taken power, has attacked queer and trans people first. And I pointed that out deliberately in that debate because when you call queer people a social contagion, you're essentially saying that you take issue with them because they pose a threat to your very narrow viewpoint of what is okay for men and women to do. And I think that a lot of that goes back to economic beliefs and this need to control people and control their self-expression so that they are the most productive members of the state. And they're like focusing on their job. That's why we go back to the nuclear family. And like women are just supposed to be these like baby making farms and
so
men are going to work.
Machines and capitalists.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, if that's what we're going to go back to, then one, bring back Quaaludes. Two, women are going to start poisoning their husbands again. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that time really wasn't good for anybody. And it's just interesting to me because, again, like, we go back to these coups that have happened throughout history. This is where they take issue almost first all the time.
I think he knows that.
Exactly.
Like, it felt like when we were talking, like, when we would say something in contradiction, he would, like, laugh. Because he knew.
Yeah.
Like, let me guess, you're going to say
yeah. No, well, that's the thing is I was not going to give him the soundbite of me going, you're a on camera because I knew he would utilize that. So I chose the word fascist deliberately when I really just wanted to call him an but I was going to talk around the subject enough to just hint at it enough to hopefully people at home can kind of come to that conclusion on their own. Yeah.
You're drawing like the perfect parallels, and he's going to watch this. And hey, Michael, watching this video right now. But he's going to look at his audience and he's going to laugh, and all they're calling me a blah, blah, blah. All they believe in is Donald Trump, this, that, and the other. And even if he's not an outright the rhetoric that he's using is identical.
Yeah.
And if people want to look that up, like there are clips that are going viral on TikTok, and this is really scary, of their speeches being translated into English. And people in the comments are like, wait, why were we told this guy's bad? This, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. It's because it sounds identical to the rhetoric being spoken by the MAGA movement. And it's really scary to see this tide. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, and the focus, I think also it's really important to understand when they talk about Make America Great Again and like how that relates to the party, the quite literally got the idea for gas chambers from the chemicals that we were spraying on folks at the southern border. We were already gassing people, and they quite literally used that exact chemical compound to annihilate millions of people. And when we talk about Make America Great Again, I'm like, oh, are we going all the way back to like the America that inspired the Nazis? Because that's what it's sounding like. Like, that's what this rhetoric is coming from. And it's not an accident that like we are seeing a very similar rise to power. Donald Trump came to power in his second term, just like did.
Why do you think that is? Like, why is society so cyclical like this? Like, is it something intrinsic in us that we just have to have times of peace, that we get bored and then leads these times of war? Like, why do we have these cycles? Like,
toxic.
Yeah,
like
honestly, in us.
I hate to say it.
Honestly, we're in late stage capitalism, and a lot of people right now don't have access to resources, and they're pissed off, rightfully so. And we have strongmen like Donald Trump coming in and saying, I can fix your problems. Yes. It's actually these immigrants coming in. It's actually these trans and queer people. These is why you can't afford groceries.
Yeah.
And people are making that connect because they're and what
but
they're
let me
getting from
pass
the Democratic
tariffs.
Party. Not to crap all over the DNC right now, but a lot of the liberal establishment is really, no, actually, we're fixing things. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And when you're telling people, yeah, inflation's going down, even if
they
statistically that's true, people aren't feeling that at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So they're going to choose somebody who's saying, I'm going to fix all of our problems, instead of somebody who's just saying, we're bringing back normalcy, we're bringing back brat. Like, it's something that is like generating with working class people who aren't feeling those types of things. Yeah. So all I'm advocating for right now is we need some left-wing populism. That's what I'm looking for. It's the only way to combat fascism. Really,
like actual progressives. And the fact that the Democrats have more or less just abandoned the working class and like refused to put progressives in positions of power, in positions of like, I will say though, David Hogue did get a DNC chair, so we love that. But the inability to call these people what they are is very dangerous. And I think that as a society, we need to look at people like Michael and say, okay, yeah, that's a
That's the thing is they will say that. They'll say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And then at a funeral for Jimmy Carter, they're going to sit right next to him and play games. They're going to be best buds. Like the American people see that hypocrisy. And they're not wrong in calling him a threat to democracy, but live up to that. Don't go back on what your word is or what you said. Or Kamala Harris saying that she wouldn't have protected trans access to gender affirming care in certain states. Like that is outright just capitulating to the right wing. Like how are you expecting people who have advocated for you to continue to do that if you're going to just throw them under the bus because you don't think it's favorable? Anyway, I'll stop ranting about the DNC. But
even Trump, there's like footage of him before he ran the first time, and they're like, well, we think about the bathrooms. Like the bathroom issue with trans people in bathrooms, very small. People should use whatever bathroom they want. He's
the most progressive in the Republicans.
Exactly. And now he's just realized, this is what people want to hear. I'll give it to them because it gives me power. They'll vote for me and I'll be in power.
And Michael, you can talk to your audience about this. Trump was one of the first people to allow trans women in beauty pageants, which is so crazy to see the turnaround.
He's a New Yorker. He's a New Yorker, and now he's like, oh wait, I see a party that is ruled by blind belief. I can hop on that,
Yeah. Fascism.
On this particular prompt, I wasn't able to speak, but once again, he's using Catholic language here, which if you're ever trying to decode like what beliefs Michael Knowles have, like this is your book to it. They like to separate experience and identity as two distinct things, where they'll never say a gay person. Like Michael Knowles, you won't catch him saying that. Or any traditional Catholic out there. They'll go, a person with same-sex attraction, and they'll say your experience isn't your identity and try to erase your identity as a queer person by saying, gender dysphoria, same-sex attraction, whatever it is, it's kind of just a problem that you experience, but really, you should just belong to our religion, which is, if we were to look at identity, which is to say, we could say that an experience that is integral through your entire lens of which you view the world and go through the world and live your life, I think that's at least paramount to an identity. And so he makes this distinction, and he does it later in the debate, that like, I'm not here to say you can't be happy and that I'm here to take away your rights. I just want to take away these ideologies. Same thing getting to his third prompt on eradicating transgender identity, which is exactly the same rhetoric that fascists have used.
Bingo.
No, I don't want to throw you in jail. I just want to throw you in jail if you say that it's okay to be trans or if it's okay to love.
Yeah, that's what I was confused about because he started bringing up the whole bathroom thing.
He'll take your hormones away. He'll take your medical care away. He'll take your rights away. He'll take your protections against hate crimes away. And then go, but I'm not trying to hurt you. And you're like, I don't know a way in which we can separate those two terms of identity and experience. And for him to then throw eradicate and erase in there in this technical distinction might work in some philosophical textbook. But the interesting thing that I was going to also try to grill him on, which is another document that you can figure out what he believes based off of, is that in his own book admits the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. Goes on to say they must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Now, that does proceed right from saying that homosexual acts are close to life and don't proceed from genuine affection. But he's picking needlessly offensive language that doesn't even fall in line with his own teaching, and that it'd be interesting to try to grill him on how many people do you think are naturally gender nonconforming or attracted to members of the same sex? And he kind of be stuck in this quagmire because he wants to say it's a social contagion, which he did cite this terrible study on rapid onset gender dysphoria, which he alluded to, which is a terrible study that only pulled sample sizes of people that already agreed that their children had this existing condition. So really his study is just showing that people that believe their children are away and that it's a social contagion believe that it is a social contagion. And then he'll quote something from the 80s, which is 80% of children will desist from their trans experience, which is a terrible study that didn't actually measure trans identity. And the desistance myth we know is not true, and that we have longitudinal studies over the course of 20, 30, and 40 years that unhappiness with somebody's sex assigned at birth does stay stable and actually gets worse into adulthood. He's quoting terrible studies and making terrible philosophical arguments, but that would have been fun to kind of roast him on.
We have Catholic ChatGPT right here.
So yeah, let's talk about it. The third prompt was transgenderism should be eradicated from the planet.
Once again, I just want to start off with saying it is, like you said, needlessly violent, and the verbiage is just to get clicks. We have to keep harping this. The verbiage is to get clicks and to sell cigars and to sell ads. Does this man actually believe that? No, we have to remind the people out there, calm down, like just tone it down. This man's just trying to sell some cigars. He wants a hot tub. He wants a pool. You know, just that's what it comes down to.
I don't want to like excuse it all though, because he very well might actually believe that. But whether or not he believes it, I think is like irrelevant. I think at this point enough people are saying that, and we are seeing the fact like what the life expectancy for trans women is like 40s, and that's not because of suicide. That's because they are statistically the most likely to experience extreme violence. And I think that also his inability to like quote factual medical science as a nurse. I work with trans youth. I've worked with hundreds of trans youth. I have administered gender affirming care, and I'm going back to school to get my doctorate to continue that care. We know that access to gender affirming care statistically decreases suicidal ideations immediately by 50%. By 50%. To ignore that or to negate that as factual evidence is to wish harm and violence against trans people.
Well, it was odd because he couldn't even give me like an idea what his what he would do for the where he kept avoiding the word eradicate.
Yeah, you're like, what are you going to do to me?
I know. I said multiple times. I was like, what do you mean? And he wouldn't give me a straight on answer because he knows what type of door that's going to open. Like if he's as clear as he wants to be. So it just was surprising to hear and see somebody sit in front of you and like not even care about the anecdotal experience at all. Like there wasn't even, and I almost just felt like I don't know why I'm sitting here.
Yeah,
like,
there's no good faith.
There's no point.
There's no good faith in this conversation.
He's literally looking at me telling me, you are pretending. I think that's exactly what he said. Yeah. That I was pretending and that
you'll
like, well, I'm doing a good job.
I really hope they keep that.
If they didn't, then that's a crime in itself.
It just was wild.
I think it just really shows like they all have their little job to play in the Daily Wire apparatus industry as well. Like Ben Shapiro's the policy guy who's walking Trump through Israeli embassies. Like Brett Cooper is there for the youngins to try to get Gen Z. And Michael's really there just to rage bait. He's there to keep his audience angry. He's there to show how easy it is to demonize a marginalized group that already has been disenfranchised by the government. So it's really indicative because he doesn't have any policy, like you're saying. There's nothing to move from here. Mm-hmm. It's just stay angry at these people.
And they know how social media works. Rage, and I think it's called outrage, is the number one most reshared by 20 times. 20 times more likely than any other emotion. The person, if they feel outraged, they'll reshare it.
Yeah.
And it's like the next one is joy, and it's half as much.
Well, he's gonna get his shares.
Like, yeah, like that's why I'm there. They're like, keep them sell ads.
Yeah, I mean, conservatism is just rooted in fear. At the end of the day, it's how simple it is.
Yeah. There's brain scans to back that up too. Like if you look at a brain scan of people as they are exposed to conservative rhetoric, their like fear center in their amygdala, which is the portion of the brain that controls emotions, lights up like fireworks. And it's just like this dopamine-filled fear response. And I had this conversation with my mom. Sorry, Brenda, if you see this. You know, she kind of fell down the Fox News rabbit hole, which was a shocking experience because the first political conversation my mom and I ever had was my mom telling me abortion is important because you deserve every option available to you and you don't know what life is going to throw at you. That was the first political conversation I ever had. To see my mom fall down the Fox News rabbit hole, and I was like, Mom, it is not good for you to be in this consistent, like cortisol-fueled fear response all the time. And she's like, well, what would you have me watch? CNN? And I'm like, how about a movie?
Yeah.
How
about something joyful?
Modern Family?
How about something,
You used to love Once Upon a Time. Where'd it go?
Yeah.
So I just think that, like rage farming and this like fear-based content is the name of the game for them.
How do we combat that?
With factual evidence and by educating. Like, I think that's the core.
I disagree.
Of
I don't think people are drawn towards education, as sad as it is to say. I really think you have to give people treats. And the treats are, hey, we want you to have health care.
Yeah.
Like, we want you to be well off for your family.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to be away from work more often. We want you spending time with your family.
Yes.
Like, that's how you win people over. And
but isn't that education? Isn't that?
I honestly feel like a lot of people, if there are Michael watching this with this community, are laughing at all these enraged liberals that are like just talking about all the crazy things that Michael said. Like, I really think that there's a certain sect of the population that isn't drawn towards that empathetic outlook, and I think you can reach them in other ways too. It is a very pessimistic view, but I think it's.
And we also have to say, okay, your fear is justified to this level. It's not justified to this level. Like my whole family, who is very conservative, they're like, okay, well, this fear of protecting the tribe, it has kept, civilization safe from contagions that have come across the ocean and stuff like this. And it's a natural, tribal thing that protects us. We want to protect the family. And we have to focus on, at the end of the day, is what we have in common, which is we both want safe families. We both want safe neighborhoods, safe everything. It's just how we go about it is different. So let's not get caught up in, you're going to go about it this way. We all want the same thing. We want a safe country.
Well, I also think it's like in a community level too. I'll clarify that. I'm more speaking about the people who are watching Jubilee Surrounded are there to cheer on their person. I'm here to cheer on Michael and screw all those libs. Yeah. But I think in like the real world and community, right? Once you're friends with the queer person, you chill the hell out.
Yeah.
Like for me, I grew up in a very homogenous town where there weren't a lot of people that were gender nonconforming. I had those same biases that a lot of people have. And as soon as you make one friend from person, it's like, oh my God, all these fears I had are just completely stupid and wrong. Like, get out of your bubble. That's the one advice, is make friends with queer people.
That's it.
I do hope, though, that they fact check him on a few very important things, because this claim, I remember specifically, he was like, the term two-spirit didn't exist.
That is true, actually.
Until 1990.
I didn't even know what to say because he asked me, and as soon as he said, what is two-spirit, I went, whoo, right out of here. I was like, help. Everything is gone out of my brain right now.
And the fact of the matter is, anyone with a brain can use Google in their pocket computer, aka your phone, and look up all of the different multicultural examples of gender nonconforming people that have been around since time eternal, quite literally since the Romans, and before,
Egyptians.
and the Egyptians.
There are tombs with two men buried together.
I mean, it's just like insane, because like to try as like a white person to claim that you know more about Native communities and their gender cultural norms then like the fact that we had like indigenous folks in the room that were like, hey, that's actually not true. Yeah. And it just like didn't even faze him.
And that's what it comes down to.
And
it's
they
like,
just moved the goalpost.
What's true is like based on his reality, and he has no concern for anyone else's. He doesn't care about your trans experience. He doesn't care about their twin spirit history. It's like his truth is based purely on his experience, which is wild to me.
I really came in there like hoping that I could just speak from my anecdotal experience, and I think I said that in the beginning, like when I first went up, but the second he started talking, it was so clear that there was nothing that was going to be said that was going to say anything. In fact, I almost felt like it made him like more excited to see him, like to see me defending myself. And then I could tell he caught me up a little bit when he asked me how long I'd been transitioning. But what he doesn't know is like all the social aspects that I had done previous to this 3-4 years before, or even growing up. Like it has always been to the core who I was always just a little girl. And so you can't make an opinion on that when you weren't around for it. Like it's just, you can't. No.
Yeah. Like God forbid Michael was like allergic to peanuts or something, and he comes up to me as a kid and he's like, every time I eat these peanuts I swell up, and I'm like, no, you got to keep eating those peanuts. It's like, I'm not going to tell him
allergies don't exist.
What his is. I'm not going to tell him what his experience should be. If he as a kid is telling me, hey, this thing is making me feel bad, and trans kids to the point of taking their life, you have to believe people and their stories. Like
I think also, does it matter? Like if you think being trans is a choice, what does it matter to you? Like why do you care?
It challenges
Get
their
a
whole
hobby.
structure.
It's giving boredom. It's giving, I don't have anything to enrich my life. Do you need some enrichment time in your enclosure?
Back to what we're talking about with individuality. They can't control you if you have individuality. That's why it matters.
They can't pin you down. And I think also, just to circle back to, again, these false claims he was making, that there was a reason why when I got up there, he's like, oh, like trans or non-binary identities didn't exist until 2001 or whatever the he said. I'm like, hey, Michael, do you know what the first book burning was? Because that was near 100 years ago, and it was a trans library. and they burned down a trans healthcare clinic. So how are you going to try and tell me that like these identities didn't exist until recently, when like that was the first book burning dingus?
It's just all semantics. Like his thing was in 2001, a government finally recognized a trans identity, which is like, dude, that doesn't mean anything.
That literally doesn't mean shit.
It
was so
Only to his convenience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Either way, Marsha P threw that book or brick. So
You had a pretty heated exchange with Michael. Was there anything that you felt like you didn't get off?
I mean, he just like derailed the whole conversation. I honestly was over it as soon as I sat down. I was like, he's clearly not here in good faith. And if he's going to sit there, you know, and like call us men parading in women's clothing, like there's no point for me to even further on a discussion with you. Like absolutely pointless. I don't know if there's something specific you want me to talk about. Like I'll elaborate on that, but.
Yeah, there was like one exchange that you had where I think he outright said that, like a bunch of confused, whatever, men in dresses or something, and you're like, I'm not confused or something like that, or I forgot specifically what you said, but I just think it was really brave in the moment, I think, to take on someone who's saying that.
Thank you. And I mean, I'm not confused. I've been living this way for 7+ years. If I was confused, like I would have changed something up by now, but it turns out that I'm furthering and continuing on with transitioning even more. So it's like, where's the confusion? If I'm so confused, and even if I was confused, why does that dictate me being happy, being confused? Like if I'm really mentally ill and I'm like, you know, this is how I feel happy, and like I don't want to myself being mentally ill, just like,
what does it matter?
Literally clap your hands that I'm mentally ill. Who cares?
Yeah.
Michael reminded me of what I grew up around and what I kind of thought until I was like, oh my God, I'm gay. And that was just kind of like, oh, anybody who's going to talk to me about this, I already know that they're wrong, because I have this truth that I'm like so sold on because of God that like this is true. But what's crazy is like I didn't even know the Bible that well at the time. It was this concept that the church was telling me was God. And so my mind was just like completely controlled by what the South was telling me was correct. And so anything anyone was going to tell me, I was like, oh, you just need saving. Like, it's okay. Like, I'll listen.
I'll pray for you.
But like nothing you say to me is going to like get to me, because I have these, you know, random texts to pull out on you. But yeah, that's just
Keyword
kind
control.
of what it is. Yeah.
Well,
Control.
that was the whole thing he was doing, is like anytime anyone like had a valid point against him, he would just like make up these jokes. What did he bring up when I called him out for being he was like, well, Alex Jones is turning the freaking frogs gay. I'm like,
man.
dude, are you like, be so for real? Like, sit here and have this conversation with me. If you're gonna like use violent hate speech in a group of people who are directly affected by that violent hate speech, stand 10 toes down. Like, stand down and like have this conversation. Because the second I was like, who else shared this rhetoric, Michael? He's like, oh, are you gonna say?
I felt like he didn't really believe these things he was saying. He was just like saying it to like clicks.
Yeah, because then he was like, well, you drink water and drink water, so what does that make you? I'm like, we're talking about
Water's
ideologies,
a need to
baby girl.
survive.
I can't wait to see our reactions, like to some of the things, because I was jarred. You guys, I couldn't
and then looking over the camera's like zooming in.
I was like looking at everybody like very frantically, like, is anybody else just so confused?
My eyeballs hurt from rolling back into my head.
I think it's indicative that y'all care about your mental health and don't watch a lot of right-wing media. But like, I kind of walked in just exactly knowing what he what he was going to say, just because I subject myself to all these terrible people.
I didn't even know who he was. He walked in and I was like,
he's really JV.
man.
He's like
For real.
JV Daily Wire, and that's why he has to say things that are so outrageous, is because he wants a role in the bigger picture. Like, he wants to be the next Matt Walsh.
He wants to be in the higher rankings of Gilead.
Yeah,
under his eye.
I wanted to ask
Okay,
him,
short
like,
films
what's your
weren't doing
legacy at the end
well.
of the day? You're on your deathbed. What are you going to tell your grandchildren? I attacked a minority and I made society more angry at each other. Like, that's your legacy. You know, like, you didn't spread
solidify the Trump
compassion.
era. Yeah, literally.
It's bizarre, man.
Can I jump in with one thing here?
Yeah, of course. Come in.
I was going to say, on this prompt in particular, it was obvious that Michael Knowles didn't care about the science. Like, if you presented him with contrary studies, when we can look at the Toronto study, when we can look at the National Transgender Health Survey, which had 80,000 participants, he's going to pull out the Swedish study in particular. But it's not because he's actually honestly looking at the science. It's not because he looked at these systematic reviews. And I encourage people listening to go to Cornell's What We Know, which has between 40 and 70 studies for each of these queer issues if you want to actually look at the science. All he's doing is cherry picking data so then he can get people stuck in looking at the data. And then once he's defeated on the data, then he falls back on into his original theocratic argument, which is this can never be accepted. So it's incredibly dishonest of him to start quoting science when he doesn't care about what the science says. No. He's not going to change his mind. It doesn't matter if he'll pull up the Cass study, and when you look at the French study, and then you look at the U.S. critique of the Cass study, and now the Cass study is even being walked back, he doesn't care about the science. He cares about these underdeveloped theological arguments from his own tradition. And then they go on this propagandistic diatribe in which they try to conflate these narratives around how 8-year-olds are getting trans surgeries. They walk into school one day and they come back as a different sex, to then in this propagandistic way lump that into all trans issues and purposefully poison the well to enter into this bad faith conversation. And Michael doesn't care about science, I think, at the end of the day.
Also, another good resource for people at home. Syracuse University did a literature review of over 46 credible studies regarding gender-affirming care, and it's available on the internet right now. Hopefully, I don't know, the Trump administration has been deleting a lot.
Download it right now.
But there's a lot of reliable research that people can look at, and he knows that it's out there and is cherry picking a very select set of unreliable studies that match his views. It's called, hold on, confirmation bias. Thank you.
Which we all have too.
You're saying something, Destiny?
Oh yeah, I wanted to go back to the gay frogs thing because I had so much to say on that. Like, I forgot the chemical name, but the chemical that they studied that they put in the water that had the male frogs like basically have premature genitalia. On top of that, they grew ovaries. It explained why men could be gay. If the study's true, then it could explain why men could be gay, but it still doesn't explain why women could be gay.
I think if you just look at a man, you can understand why women are gay.
Valid. No, you
no
guys,
offense, you guys. We love you.
But agreed.
Sorry.
If I could just say, when he had said, I'm not coming for trans people, I remember I wasn't in front of him, but I was from my seat. I said, you can't separate the two. You can't say I want to eradicate transgenderism, but, I still am okay with trans people existing. I just want to get rid of their transgenderism. That's like saying I want to get rid of homosexuality and think that you're going to not get rid of the gay people. Or I want to get rid of being,
I want to get rid of Catholicism because they are so many young boys or something.
How do you extract this fundamental part of who we are? You can't do that. You can't. He's trying to wave a magic wand or something, but you can't do that. You have to throw the baby out with the bathwater on an issue like this.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get him to make him explain. He wouldn't explain it.
He's doing that very deliberately. Yes. I want to be really clear that it's a cop out. Yeah. He's trying to present the violent extermination of a marginalized group as I'm not getting rid of them. Yeah. I just want to get rid of everything that they are.
And that's when he was smiling. That's when I noticed, when we were sitting there and I kept asking, how are you planning to eradicate? How are you planning to separate me? And I think he said something about making stronger
teach boys
laws
not to dress like girls.
And about the bathrooms. He said that he was going to make stronger laws for the bathrooms, and I asked him how. And he said there already are some. And I'm like, crazy.
Well, here's the thing. I used to date a Marine. The first thing they do when you join the Marines, they minimize your identity. You all have the same haircut. Here's all your camos. All you guys are going to wear the same thing. They take away identity to control you, so you start being easily controlled as a group. You see it in pop culture. What did Mr. Smith or Agent Smith say to Neo? He called him Mr. Anderson. He would not call him by the name he wanted to go by, Neo. He would call him by Mr. Anderson because he can control him if he can control his identity and strip him down. Yeah. You're this,
And Trump's doing that again. Trump literally just reduced the amount of haircuts that people in the military could have, the amount of nail colors that people in the military can wear. It's all about, you are going to fit into this box that I give you, And if you don't, you're going to be subjected to violence because it goes back to fear. It goes back to control because, again, they want people to play into this game that exploits them. And it's a lot easier to exploit people if they don't have a sense of self-identity.
Work.
Okay, so the final prompt was gay pride should be banned? Is that what it was?
Hold on, can I pause?
Yeah.
I have to leave, you guys. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I do have to leave.
Okay, yeah, you do. You have to work tomorrow.
Is that okay?
Of course.
Video?
No, it's okay.
Should I say goodbye?
Yeah, just you have to leave. It just say goodbye to people because people are watching, probably obsessed with you. You have you have all these fans, and they don't want to be like, "What happened to her? Where'd she go?" Obsessed.
On that note, I love you guys. I do have to dip. Just please, if you are watching at home, plant trees, save the bees, and punch. Thank you.
Yay!
Should we like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love you
Yeah, so
much. I would love to get together.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Yes, or just scooch over, just all scooch over one seat. You could just pretty much stay where you were.
Oh, should I bring the chair back?
Yeah, just bring it back to where it was. That will be easier for the camera angle, and then I'll just tighten in the shot a little.
Yeah, she's so funny. She's
amazing.
I love that fire. It's like I definitely do not have that. And we need people like that.
I try to have it, but not like she does.
Yeah.
Like she's quick with it. I'm like, girl, go off.
Yeah. We need gay rage.
I know. I keep trying to find it, but it's just not there.
Yeah, like
I was definitely we weren't allowed to do personal attacks because Hilo was doing that to us. So I was like, why can't I say something
extremely
back?
personally attacked with the whole "you're pretending to be a woman" thing. I don't know how much more personal.
you had personal attacks. Some. Yeah.
Yeah, did he call you something after?
You told me like an ass.
Yeah.
Damn.
In his interview.
Yeah. You see how it feels?
And like none of us were overtly triggered either. So
No.
who's really the one getting worked up?
All of us are like on the other side, and we're like, "Girl, just come out." Like we feel your pain. Like just come out.
Like when I said that thing about the medals, I know that pissed him off. I didn't give a. He was talking about 900 gold medals to trans athletes, and at first I was like, "That's not happening," because I don't think it's happening the way he's trying to push it.
Yeah.
But then he was like, "No, it's happening." I was like, "Okay, good. Then they deserved it." And he was like fired up about it.
We know,
Girl, we heard. We've been new.
Okay. So that brings us to the final prompt, which was gay pride should be banned. What did y'all think about that?
So his argument was, well, there's men peeing on each other in the street and kids are watching. That should not happen. Like none of us here will say that's a thing that should happen. When I go to pride events, I go because I never saw myself in television shows and people at my school. I felt incredibly suicidal. I ended up in a mental ward because I was so sad and anxious I couldn't even get out of bed. So when I go to an event like Pride and there's people like me, I'm like, oh my God, I can take a breath. I exist here. In this one little bubble, I can exist. And he's trying to make it out like, why are we, celebrating pride? It's one of the deadly sins. Not in this context, not that side of pride. This pride is just being
the opposite of shame.
Yeah, it's feeling free of shame.
Yes,
that's all it is
right,
for us.
exactly
It's not having a bad pride that is to a detriment to us.
Also, like finding community in the people that we normally
Yes.
wouldn't. Like I didn't know any trans person growing up. Where I'm from, I don't know anybody. Like I knew maybe one or two people. And if I would have had a little bit more context, or if my parents would have had the resources, maybe things would have been a little bit different. I also struggled with my mental health. I was in a residential program for eating disorders. And that was all due to the symptoms of my gender problems. That was the whole thing.
And the second I came out and the second you had, come out, it all went away.
Yeah,
and I remember my family saying, well, it went away because you stopped fighting the good fight against, the devil. And that's why it went away, because there's no conflict anymore. You're just living that demonic life.
Well, I'm just living in a current state of euphoria. What is that? What he said?
I was like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, he was like, he said something to the context of like, I'm living in a current state of euphoria, and it's going to go away at some point. And then that's when I think I made the reference to you that had been transitioning for 7 years, and of course our other friend. So I don't know. It was again for me. I just don't. How do you interact with somebody saying something like that? Like, we all know that that's not really what's going on at Pride. What's going on at Pride is the community.
Well, we've been to Pride. All these people watching that are conservative, they haven't been, so they see it as this sort of, in their head, what they pictured as this, sex party of these like deviancies of humanity. It's really not that at all. We go there just to feel love. And like, I remember there was one group of women just walking by that was like mothers giving out hugs to people who never got hugs from their mother. And getting a hug from one of those old women was like life-changing to me. Seriously, I was like crying in the street. That's why we go to Pride, because it's like we feel accepted.
Yeah, I was able to take my mom to Pride last year, and my mom's very accepting and loving, but had never been to Pride. Grew up in the South in North Carolina, So for her to be able to have that exposure and also be able to see like it's just people coming together to love and like be excited, and also see Padam Padam be performed. Like literally, like that's what we're going for.
That's it.
Yeah, and just to
Come on, Piggy.
just to piggyback off of that, I too put myself through therapy because I was like, okay, why am I gay? I need to figure out my daddy issues. I need to do this. I was reading, is it Jackie Hilbert? I forgot what her name is, but she's like a lesbian who's not lesbian anymore. And
Jacqueline Hill? No, that's
Jackie Hilberry? I don't remember.
not Jacqueline Hill. I know who you're talking about. She has dreads.
Yes. So I was doing like anything and everything I could to like rid this out of me. And so when I remember going to my first Pride and seeing the hugs, the free dad hugs and stuff like that, and being like, oh my gosh, there's churches that are here too supporting, and that's huge in the South because you don't know, there's no churches, like there's no Christians who are like, you can be both, like that's so cool. All these like gay people are kind of coming out of the woodworks, and we're like, oh my gosh, there's like a whole community here in the South. This is so cool. Like I didn't even, like you said, I hardly knew any gay people growing up. So
no, and I think because we grew up in the same area, I think like we live in California, but I did not have the experience of the most accepting people in our community. I found I've gotten the most negative response from people that personally know me. So it's just, it's like in sectors. I just think it's very upsetting.
It's one of those things too. Shout out Channel 5. They do a lot of like YouTube journalism, and they just did an expose on a snake church in West Virginia, where basically these pastors are holding like rattlesnakes, showing that like God's going to protect them.
It's like Pentecostal.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah, kind of, sort of like that. But it's just, it's wild to me. Like if there were people like in the country that like looked at that one area and was like, all Christians are like getting bit by venomous snakes. Are you serious? And it's like, okay, well, you're pointing out an outlier against an entire community right now that's just here for love and support. But going off that point too, I think that indecency gets brought up a lot about Pride, and specifically things like public nudity, this or that and the other. And I think that really just shows kind of what Puritan sex culture looks like in the United States. Because there's so many other cultures where like even things like nudity is not something that is inherently sexual. And I think it just shows like how repressed we are, as a society of like.
I'm Korean, and in Korea you have these like Korean baths, and all the men scrub each other's backs, all the women scrub each other, and it's just like nudity is part of their culture.
But like free the nipple is like something where it's so like, oh my gosh, women's breasts, how dare you show that in public? And it's just like, I don't know, to me.
Well, he was making it about the kids. He talked a lot about how he didn't want to have to be like walking with his grandma and his kid and see somebody twerking, or even doing the splits for Pride. And what I kept thinking was like, you don't even, that's not happening. Like you can barely even get on the main street for a Pride parade. Like, I know, for real. So I think that was kind of where he was coming from, was trying to make it about like, oh, unsafety of people who don't want to see it and children. It just was kind of like, then don't go. Don't move to Hollywood. I don't know what to say.
Which is ironic coming from a Catholic.
Why is that?
Exactly, about the kids. Yeah, exactly.
That Pride's so sexual. Every time I hear that, it's from people who've never been to Pride too. So they're just getting that from the news or people, whatever they can get it from. So I also think exposure is a big thing. It's like, hey, like maybe you should try going once and see if that's really what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah, the media really does work overtime to divide us, showing the extremes on all sides, right?
They got to sell ads.
I feel like even when it comes to Christianity, Westboro Baptist Church is what you see. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like
Works
you
both
see,
ways.
you see a gay pride, you see the men peeing on each other, and then for Christianity, you see Westboro Baptist Church. That just feeds the division of people, especially like someone like me who's gay and Christian. Do you know what I mean? Who has a faith. It's like, oh my gosh, like I don't really fit in either side because they're both afraid of me. I'm like, mutant or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we have to work really, really hard to try and be objective in our culture today. It's so hard to be objective because all of the messaging on all of our social media is just like them bad, they hate us. This is who they are to just other everybody, It's really sad.
Yeah.
I just want to preface something because I know I went up there and I did agree a little bit. I mean, I don't think we should ban Pride. Like, I agree with what you guys are saying. Like, for me, when I first went to Pride, I was like, wow, like, this is a place where people are like me. I could see people that are just like me, went through the same things that I've went through and all that stuff. But I do believe, like, as a community, we do need to rebrand because I just feel like, we became, and I was trying to make this point, but I was a little nervous, and you guys make it look so easy on Jubilee. Like, every time I watch you guys, my mind went blank when I went up there. And I had no idea who Michael Knowles was until that day.
Same, girl.
So I had I was totally unbiased. I just heard the claims, and I was like, oh, this guy is really going in. But, I don't think it should be banned. However, like I said, with the rebrand, I just think it's allowed people that are just like fetishizing certain sexual acts, and they kind of take advantage where they're like, okay, we're going to kind of use the LGBT community to kind of hide under them pretty much for like fetishes and stuff. Because I went to one Pride, it was in LA, where like they kind of converted this parking lot into like a weird, like you walk through it and there was like a dude in like leather and he had like a leather dog mask. And I'm like, this isn't really what being gay is about. At least not for me. Like, if you're into that, cool. Like, straight people could be into that too. But like, I mean, it's just not really a defining moment of like what gay is.
It's just hard to cherry pick,
Yeah.
I think it's also Pride is like such a deviation from what is normally expected from people. And so people are like, I don't feel like I can really talk about, what's part of my identity except for being here. And I do think that, like, obviously some things might seem for sure out of the norm, especially if you've never experienced that. But I think that's why Pride is so cool, because there's so many different parts to attend and there's so many different communities to go be a part of. So if like one thing doesn't fit your brand, whoever's watching out there is going to be a section of Pride that you're really going to vibe with and you're really going to enjoy. And not to like be like, you can't go into these parts, but if you want to be, seeing what other people's about and hear their testimony and their story, go engage with them. And if you don't, that's cool. That's your American right. I think the biggest thing here with this conversation is believing that freedom of expression and freedom of religion, and even lack thereof, is something that is super important, not only to a functioning society, but just a free democracy. So banning things is the complete removal of any freedom of expression.
That's what we're founded on. And that's why I wanted to tell Michael is like, if someone ever tried to ban Catholicism or ban your right to get married to who you want, I would be the first person out in the street picketing for your rights, Michael. Like, and
the queers are more American than Michael. Isn't that crazy?
No, but I'm
MAGA
serious.
is not American.
I'm serious. Like, I used to have this, chip on my shoulder about religion because I was so hurt by it. But now I realize, like, diversity of thought is very important, just as much as diversity of, identities, of sexual identities or your race or whatever. And if someone tried to come to my family and say, Baptists shouldn't be allowed to worship, I'm going to be out in the street throwing bricks. Yeah. I'm not Baptist, but they deserve the right to do what they want to do. And it's just a respect thing.
I really love that point, though, that you made, Mason, about Pride and just like things that maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable to talk about or find community in anywhere else. I think that that's why it's important. So I get it may seem outlandish or confusing for some people, but sometimes that's the only people's spaces to find their own community. So I think I get the sentiment. I really do. I understand what you mean by the rebrand, but we can't cherry pick because these are events where people are finding their voice, even if it's not something we completely understand.
No, I totally get that. And I understand what you're saying as far as like freedom of expression. I totally get that. But at that point, then it should be separated, because then we have the radical right, like the extremists who are basically using that to like against us, they're weaponizing it, and they're like, look at these gay people, they're just full of like, they're lustful, they just want to have sex with everything.
That's not our responsibility, and that's a very select few.
If those people too go out, right, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh my gosh, these women just want to eat box all day. Isn't that disgusting? Their fetish, trying to be proud of that. Why are you proud of your sexual acts? Oh my gosh, these men want to like touch other men's butts. Like all this stuff is just like, they're going to make it fetishizing, like no matter what it is. And we shouldn't play into that rhetoric of like also trying to ostracize people. Even if it does seem
If I can jump in on this one here.
Yeah, of course, Kate. But then I do want to get back to you, Destiny, to respond to that. Yeah.
I was going to say that Michael and I talked for, 6-7 minutes, particularly on the fact that he's using these examples of nudity or kink at Pride. And there's like, oh, is there a discussion there? Yeah, you can have a discussion out there in an internal forum. But Michael doesn't care if all of the nudity is gone or kinks aren't there, whatever it is. His argument is that even if we can't have the floats, we can't have the rainbows, we can't have anything, he wants to enforce the Miller test, which is an obscenity law that hasn't been used in decades, that hasn't been tried in court because of the three-pronged approach. And so all of these like pedantic conversations around what specifically is or isn't happening at Pride doesn't matter, because he doesn't care. Once again, at the end of the day, if you defeat him on the first set of arguments, he's got that backstop, which is even for you to say I'm gay or I'm trans and it's awesome is something that he'd want to enforce according to things that are offensive to community or essentially community standards. And so him and I were talking about that. And so I think, if you want to have a discussion about what is or isn't allowed at Pride, awesome. It's a great discussion. Not with Michael Knowles, because he doesn't care. He wants the whole endeavor banned. Essentially, he doesn't even think rainbow flags should be flown because they're inherently sexual, because they symbolize pride, and pride is inherently sexual. And then to turn the tables on him and my discussion with him on, well, then your marriage is inherently sexual if even not showing nudity is inherently sexual, just talking about sexual ethics. So it's this weird double standard where he wants straight relationships and marriages. He wants kissing on screen. He wants people to be able to celebrate their straight marriages, which is awesome. I'm all for that. I don't think we should be banning Pixar for having straight characters. But it's this wild double standard where he's going to make it illegal in every case, regardless of if we quote unquote clean up our act here. Once again, Michael Knowles arguing in bad faith. Like, what else is the sky blue? That's what I think was a particularly asinine aspect of this conversation. He's not there to debate, and he could never change his mind because he's fundamentally fueled by this religious dogma.
He keeps moving the goalposts. And I think he did say something about pride. Was it you, Kate, or maybe Destiny, said, well, what if we could, quote unquote, clean it up, and it was just wholesome at Pride? There was no fetish stuff. It was just, soccer moms with strollers or whatever. He still said, I would still categorize all of that as offensive and obscene because it's based off of sexuality. But I can kind of see what you're saying, Destiny, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm wrong. But are you saying that if we are seen by someone like Michael or by other people as, perverted, sexual deviates and all that stuff, and your argument or your message is, no, we're not like that, we are regular people with relationships just like you, then is it your argument that when those other fetish things kind of come into play, it's feeding that argument against us? And it's almost like now we have to answer for that because we're trying to say that we're not that. But is that what you're saying? Like we have to work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just pretty much trying to look in the perspective of like someone from like a really small town that probably doesn't even know what gay is really. And so they see people like on TV that are just being really sexual, really lustful. It's like, okay, even as a gay woman, if I had a kid, like I would still be like, whoa, like I don't know if I really want you around that. Now, granted, I don't think Pride is for kids. I think anytime you mix adults and alcohol, that's not a good. That's
gay
not a
or
place
straight,
for kids.
right?
Gay or straight.
Gay or straight events, yeah.
Exactly. Like that's not a place for kids. But I just feel like for me, if I had that perspective, if I was just someone that didn't know what gay was and I saw that was my first introduction, I'd be like, oh yeah, this needs to go. Like this needs to be banned. What you do in the privacy of your bedroom is your business. I'm not saying that it's wrong or right. That's your business as long as it's two consensual adults. However, I'm just trying to really get that crowd, because at the end of the day, you know, we see kind of like the reversal of like legislation. And it's like, well, where did we go wrong as a community to see that reversal?
Yeah, I think this is like the beautiful thing of seeing how diverse the mindset is of the community. You know, it's not a monolith. Everybody has their own opinions and their own ways that they like to engage with the community, and that's great. I think the danger is really where you make selections on like what is acceptable or how do we become normal, because that's what we're seeing right now with a lot of politicians who think it's not worth the fight to fight for trans issues anymore. It's LGB without the T. Let's separate that. And to continue going down that rabbit hole, I think, is an ever-moving treadmill. There's a group, and one of our contestants is one of the founders, apparently, who's telling me after that. It's called Gays Against Groomers, where we're gay people, and that's totally normal, and that's totally fine, but, it's these nasty people that are, like, putting their fetishes out in the world that we need to actually get rid of. And that just completely, like, it erases what it means to be queer. And like being queer is by definition outside of the norm. It's what's expectations.
I think he said that at one point.
Yeah, and I just think it's important to just stand together in solidarity and say, hey, I don't have to do what you do, or I don't have to like advocate or advertise myself as like part of this. But at the same time, I also don't want to like use the same shame tactics on you that was used on me by like straight people and stuff like that.
And that's where
I'm not saying that's what you're saying at all, but I think
that's where it gets scary, is when it comes down to like trying to exclude certain people or certain groups, even if it's not intentional. Like I really understand where you're coming from, because before even I came out as gay, trans, anything, like I was honestly very anti-trans, gay, all that stuff.
Yeah, they ingrained it into you.
Absolutely, 100%. So I understand the perspective of being like, oh my gosh, this is a lot, but that is what Pride is. Pride is important because it gives people an outlet to be different. So it's hard. You really just said it perfect. I don't think I could say it any better. Like, you just can't use the same tactics on people that have been used against us. I think we have bigger things to focus on.
Yeah. And straight people, have you ever seen like straight people role play at like bars where they're pretending not to know each other, and then they're like doing stuff in public, like at other places? I'm like, I'm not going to be doing that. That's weird to me, but I respect your right to do it. You know?
I mean, I get what you guys are saying. I just think like, if I'm all, like I said, I'm all about freedom of expression, but if I feel like there's just two different things, you know, like fetishes and being gay. Like, all we do as gay people is just experience attraction against the norm. Like, it's different, right? Because we have same-sex attraction. But what we do in the privacy of our bedroom, that's like different, you know, and that should be.
Yeah, and I think like having sex in public is something that's going to be considered indecent, right? But like wearing certain clothing or wearing like a mask, I think people could say is fetishization, in the same way of like putting on a rainbow flag means I want anal sex right now, which is what a lot of conservatives are going to say.
Destiny, can I ask you, is your concern for children too, what they're exposed to? Is that something that you're thinking about, or is it not? Is it just about really like mixing orientation and fetish?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of both. Just because I mean, I wasn't really around kids, but it wasn't until I had my niece where I kind of realized like, okay, like I'm kind of really protective of the innocence. But aside from that, I just think, obviously, like I said, like I don't think Pride is any place where children should be. I think it's totally for adults, or, you know, people that are at least 18. Because you're just around alcohol and adults, and you know, just that mixture, you're just gonna deal with like anybody being promiscuous generally.
It's not every Pride event though.
I mean, I mean, I've been to a lot of Pride events.
Same here.
And I just feel like I've seen it a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not saying that it doesn't happen, but I think that the generalization, I think, is just a little bit of a scary territory to walk on. Because I don't know, like I really get where you're coming from, but I'm not necessarily saying that I think that kids should be able to be at like these big, huge, like the WeHo Pride, like very alcohol, you know, partying, all that stuff. But I definitely think that there are spaces that there should be some sort of Pride event for kids that
they're family friendly ones.
Yeah,
it's just like with
100%.
anything that's just ratings. Like, what is your rating for this?
A lot of them
acting like it was one giant parade the whole time through June. Like, people pay tickets to
go to places. Like the Outloud Fest in Riho, like there's concerts, and I saw a lot of people this past year in a lot of like festival gear, which can be a little bit more revealing, but you know, we do that at concerts and we do it at different festivals, but once it comes to Pride, it's like, oh no, we can't because it's attached to gay.
I'm never going to take my kids to Hooters, but I don't think the government should be in there like arresting families who are taking their kids to Hooters. You know what I mean? And
that's a valid point.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh man, I was gonna say something, but I want to let you speak because you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna say I feel like this touches a lot on like the definition of Pride, because I think it started with like lesbians, gays, like the you know, I'm gay, and then it started growing into being like, oh, anybody who just has been not accepted by society, you can join us for Pride now. And I think that's kind of drawing the gray area, but I also think that, you know, I'm cool with it because I know what it feels like to be like, oh, I'm weird because of this one thing. So I love that we have this one time, this 1 month where anybody who has felt that can now celebrate it. But I do think it is weird. I think we're in this weird transition to where that the definition of the month is changing, if that makes sense.
And that I can agree with.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think the term queer specifically was really a dirty word for a long time, and it's really starting to be co-opted. But it started off, especially with like queer theory, and this goes to Michael. If you're still watching, this is like hours in, Michael. That's crazy that you're obsessed with us.
Girl, you need to go to bed.
But it's really interesting that like queer theory talks a lot about how like the term queer really is just an all-encompassing term for like acceptance. And like that's what it is like queer means to be different than, and being able to be okay with that is something that's so cool and radical. And I don't know, I don't think we should have gay events, and I don't think anyone's advocating for this, but like we shouldn't have gay events and then separate les events and then bi events. I think it's cool that like we're all in this together, being like, we don't have to be part of the patrarchy or
and we still have rules,
honey.
You know, because they're like, okay, this is a family event, so no showing genitalia, blah blah blah. We have rules. Like we're not like psychos that are like, just bring your kids and here's like a guy having sex with someone.
I think the things that you're saying are extremely, I really mean it, like very situational. Like nobody in their right mind is going to advocate for public displays of anything sexual, like it's against the law. Like nobody, I don't want to see that. I'm there for the queerness. I'm here for all of that. I'm not there for anything weird, and most people aren't. You know?
There for the grandma
I think
hugs.
it does happen though, and to Destiny's point, it happens.
Does,
but my thing is, I also don't think there should be punitive measures, and that's really what's the conversation here? Should people be punished for doing something that's outside of the norm or what's not being asked, or should it just be something where like, oh, we didn't expect that to happen. Let's look over here, sweetie. Let's go to this little event. Like that's what I think should really be like the solution.
This topic came up on my middle ground about gay pride and all of that, and I go more into it on my solo reaction, which is coming out very soon. What I said was, because I can understand, I work with kids and I am very protective about what kids are exposed to. So what I said was, what if we had something where like, because Pride is the weekend, right? Saturday and Sunday. What if Saturday we all as a community decided was 18 and over stuff, and then Sunday would be more wholesome, where we could feel confident bringing kids to it, we wouldn't have to worry about some things that we wouldn't want kids to see. That way we can have the best of both worlds. Right? Where 18 and over would have that experience, and then kids can come in on Sunday or whatever, and moms and dads and, you know, families or whatever. And then that would be when you would invite your conservative friends, come on a Sunday.
Yeah, like, look at
you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think of that kind of an idea?
I think, well, I'll let other people talk, but I have a strong take.
Sure.
I just have a hard time with just like the separating and trying to conform away. I have a harder time with it because I don't even know many Pride events that allow minors to come in. Like I'm pretty sure that the WeHo Pride is an 18 plus, like not the parade street, like the Out Loud Festival. You can't go in there if you're a minor.
Yeah, the posters will say like 18 plus, or it'll say family friendly,
or 21 plus.
In San Francisco, I went when I was 15, 16.
Yeah,
I watched the sex act happen right in front of me when I was like 16, 17.
I don't think that's right.
Yeah, no, that's not okay.
Not right.
I'm just saying, like I saw that and it scared me, and I was like, is that what it means to be gay? Because maybe I don't want to be gay anymore. You know, I was traumatized. I totally was.
Exactly.
So I'm coming at it from both sides.
Yeah, I really get where you guys are coming from. I really do.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of nuance here, right? So it's like my specific take, if you think of everything objectively, like if I'm going to go into the minutiae of everything, I think that gender is a social construct. I'm a gender abolitionist. Does that mean I don't participate in gender? Absolutely not. So I'm someone who prevents very masculine. I will advocate for trans identities every single day. But like I think intrinsically it's something that is only existing because we've pushed it societally. And I think the same thing with like heteronormativity. There are a lot of things that we feel repulsed at. Why? Is it because it's inherently repulsive? Or is it because we've been conditioned to be like, oh my God, this is something that's wrong. This is something that's bad. And I think we're playing into heteronormativity with a little rainbow washing when we say like these are acts that are acceptable and these are acts that aren't. That is the exact same language that is used to say it's actually only men and women, and anything that's outside of that is actually icky and gross. Like to me, and I'm not blaming people for having that. I don't think people are wrong for feeling gross when they're seeing something that's outside of the norm. Because again, that's something that is just we're growing into and something that we're socialized. But I think I'm somebody who's just, I don't believe in punitive measures is going to solve something. I don't think a cop coming to throw that person on the ground for wearing like a jock strap and then taking them to prison is going to be something that solves a problem. I just don't.
Well,
and so I think, and if you don't want your kids there, that's great. I think that really it's about parenting, different styles of parenting. Like if there are parents who are going to teach their kid like, hey, let's talk about what we just saw. That might have been something that's very jarring. This is not something you do until you're of the right age. Great. If you're a parent that's like, I don't want my kids even seeing that at all, that's okay too, and you can keep your kid at home. Like to me, it's really just should be a case-by-case basis. You can take them to like a drag story hour, or you can take them to a place that's specifically designed for kids.
I don't agree with that though. I don't really like the whole drag reading to kids thing, because I think at that point that's where it gets messy.
I think we're getting into like the root of the issue, but continue.
Yeah, that's where it gets messy, because it's like.
And if I can jump in for a sec.
Yeah, go ahead, bro. I got you.
I want to hear Destiny's
I want to hear Destiny finish, and then Cade, you'll come right in after.
Perfect.
Like I said, I don't agree with that, because I think at that point that's where the right, like the really the far right, that's where they can kind of weaponize it, where it's like, oh, like they're trying to, like basically get to the kids and all that stuff. And it's like at the end of the day, do I think that should be a discussion for kids? No, I think, in schools it shouldn't.
Discussion?
Like sexuality. Because I think, they're kids. Like, you're not really experiencing that until you're like late middle school, 8th grade, beginning of high school.
I have a quick question, and then we can let Kate talk.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you were into guys and then all of a sudden became lesbian? Or when do you think that you started to feel attraction towards women?
I fell in love with my best friend in 8th grade. And that's when I realized, like, oh shit. But before that, there was kind of like signs. Like whenever I would watch movies, I would always notice the girl over the guy. And like, there was kind of little subtle hints. And I was raised in a very straight, like Catholic, so I wasn't exposed to anything gay.
So even as a kid, you knew.
Yes.
And I think that's what's beautiful. And I think you're really coming at this with good intentions. Like, I think that you want LGBTQ people to feel accepted in broader society. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But I think you just said, with what you said right there, that you knew before, like you were shown like an introduction on this is how you become lesbian or become gay. Like that's not what it's not even sexual identity. It's not just what attraction is. It's not just a part of a social identity. It's something that you intrinsically felt. You weren't conditioned or taught to do that. And I think the thing with drag story hour or anything, drag story hour isn't even really LGBTQ. It's someone in like a lot of makeup and like a gown, like reading to kids. But I hear what you're saying with the fear mongering to the right is really powerful for a lot of people that are sensitized to that. But I think what's important is just knowing that a lot of people who are queer knew that before, like any sort of like indoctrination or this or that or the other. And that's what like celebrating Pride at an early age is it's trying to remove like this is taboo until you become 18 and then you're okay talking about who you are. Like, just like kids be kids. Some kids are going to be gay, some kids aren't. But showing them gay people is not going to turn them gay.
No, I really want to get to Cade real quick because he's been waiting patiently, and then we'll come back to you, Caitlin. All right, Cade, go ahead. What did you want to say?
I was going to say, I think there's three kind of points to this conversation. One is organization. That like Pride isn't, it's not an organization. It's not, anybody can use the word Pride. It's not a trademark term. It's not owned by an organization. And so when we talk about Pride, we have to realize we're talking about a decentralized social movement with no legal apparatus for organization. And so Denver Pride is going to look different than New York Pride. It's going to be different than Pride in a library in Minneapolis. And it's going to be different than Pride in WeHo. And so I think a lot of conservatives will treat Pride as if there's this cabal of gays somewhere in the country deciding to deliberately offend Michael Knowles on TikTok because he's looking at leather daddies on TikTok. And so one, like, pride is decentralized, and so every conversation needs to be according to the governing body. And so that kind of leads me to the second point, which is responsibility, which is, yes, there are a lot of people at pride celebrations that have a lot of different things that they do. So first we need to look at, like, is this what the organizers intended? When people set out to organize WeHo Pride or Denver Pride or New York Pride or Miami Pride, what did they intend? What did they allow? And what did they permit? And if they permitted something that is utterly offensive or is harming people, absolutely hold them responsible. But in the same way that we don't hold drunk straight people at hockey games or out on the street or whatever it is, we don't hold them responsible.
I do.
You do.
Yeah,
and
I
then
do.
like the third point is when it comes to harm, especially when we're talking about kids, we know what does and doesn't harm kids. And kids seeing somebody with a wig and makeup doesn't harm them if they're reading a storybook, in the same way that clowns don't harm people. So if we're going to talk about people that are being harmed, let's talk about studies and not like, oh, I'm offended by, because the answer is like, you don't have to send your kids to a particular drag queen story hour, but that we know that kids aren't harmed psychologically when it comes to drag queen story hours overall. So it's kind of like my 3-part thing on pride discourses.
It's so cool too, like to see just how powerful the right's propaganda is, because we're talking about Drag Story Hour in a podcast right now. You know what I mean? Like this little thing where people are reading stuff and it's become so blown over and sensationalized.
Yeah, maybe a few thousand people ever went to one. You know, it's like
it's that's kind of what I was gonna say is it's very a select amount of. It's like not people don't want it to happen. Like it's already becoming a thing that's like being heavily pushed against. Like it's not something that's happening very frequently. I think sometimes things that people don't understand can scare them. And so I think if we had a little bit more context, or even you, if you knew actually like what this looked like in a school, like what it really looks like for a drag person to come in and have a story time with kids, I think that you might have a different perspective.
Well, I just think that, like you said, inherently I knew that I was gay, and I want to let you talk after. But inherently I knew I was gay since I was young, which is true. I didn't need to be exposed or shown anything. All I needed was just to know that when it was time for me to realize my sexuality, that I was in a safe space and that the world will accept me, which is what I think we should work towards. And I feel like because we have drag story hours, like in the context, every time I've seen a drag queen, I'm not saying it's bad, like it's cool, this self-expression, awesome, great. But it's always been in the context of like at a club or like sexually related. And I don't think those two things should be combined, like children and drag queens.
Okay, Caitlin, go ahead.
I don't even remember my point from way back.
Sorry.
Quickly though, drag has been around for thousands of years. I just want to say, like
Shakespeare, kabuki theater in Japan.
Like
Greek actors
sexual.
were always dressing as the women, and like that's something where we wouldn't view it as sexual.
Yes.
Like even Michael Knowles doing the "I'm a cigar salesman, guys, buy my cigar." That's drag.
Yeah.
Sorry to curse on
It
here,
is drag.
but he's literally being a masculine figure and trying to play it up
Yes.
so his audience knows this is how masculine I am.
Tobacco's masculine. Someone told him that when he was a kid. He saw like, you know, the cowboys and the westerns doing it, so he's playing into that matrix he was taught. Oh, this is what it's like to, and you wear a suit if you're a man, right? And you do this if you're a man. You have your hair back and you talk very proudly, and you don't wait behind women that drive too slow, and you know all these things that
I can't believe he did. He talked about women that drive too slow.
Yeah,
like blatant misogyny, like right there.
So for those of you that don't know, if they don't leave this in the film, he said it makes him very frustrated to wait behind women in traffic.
Literally said
very
that.
bizarre offhand comment.
Yeah.
But
Totally said that.
But it's playing up the character, like
yeah, it's a character. It's drag. It's pushing into what society has told you this construct of a man should be. You know.
I also think that they always go to, the kids, as if we're predators, and that's what I'm like. That's where I have an issue.
It's the Catholic Church.
Yes, we don't have to shove sexuality down kids' throats. Absolutely, they're young. They need to play with like Legos and Barbies and do whatever they want to do. But also, like, they shouldn't be like, why are these two women kissing? You know, like they can be in a story, like a book, and it should just be normalized. You know what I mean? Like a kid's book.
But they just don't need like a drag queen to read it to them. Like
they don't need that. That's up to their parents.
Yeah, that's
right?
totally like if you want to do that, cool. But I just think like at that point, that's when stuff can get clipped, and then it just looks bad to the far right. And it's like, at that point, it's like, how can I argue? Because it's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to.
We don't need to. We don't need to look.
With like, I can't believe Spider-Man is at this birthday party. Are you kidding me? He's going to tell people to jump off buildings. I don't want my kid to be in that danger.
We're not trying to cater to the far right.
Right. It is what it is. Like,
They're always going to find a reason to not like us. So it's just kind of like, whatever, like they can parent how they want to parent, and we can parent how we want to.
Even like the drag queens, like if you saw how this was happening, like it's not like they're walking in these one little suit spandex with their legs and their boob shit. That's not what's happening. I think what you said, they're in these ball gowns and they're in their wigs and they're in there to read. They're not there to be sexual at all.
It does happen. I will say that.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that you're talking about. It's happened before, but I think on a majority, when you look at it, like I've seen drag, literally someone dressed up as like a banana, and that was like drag.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like literally they just had like that banana suit, like the PB&J thing, and like that's considered drag.
And
like,
drag is
so
exploded to what it can mean now. Drag is just like, oh, what is your expression of identity now?
Yeah.
Even like on RuPaul's, they don't say like, may the best woman win. They say, may the best drag queen win now, because drag has exploded to, cis women and anyone who wants to come and say, oh, look, I'm a funny character. That's drag now. Like when a kid in high school is playing Peter Pan, but it's a girl, that's drag. Like whether you like it or not,
And at the end of the day, I think he was trying to use this tactic in this argument of being like, oh, we have to protect our children. These are predators. And then he was arguing with, what's this? I'm so sorry. Is it Cade?
Cade, yeah.
Okay.
Cade.
Yeah. What I would have done, which is like, okay, so if you take that away, can we still have our pride? And he couldn't answer that.
I
So
didn't want people doing the splits in the street.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No
acrobats.
Yeah.
Or acrobatics around. Gymnastics is evil.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. It sounds outlandish, but when we like capitulate to like, okay, we need to come up with what's acceptable on a standard, like you'll get people like that who are in the conversation. And I think it's easier to just say like, let's not care. And like, if something is happening that we don't want to see, let's turn away and like go somewhere else. Like, I think that's
my
easy.
fear. Like, I'm not trying to cater to the far right as if like, oh, like try to understand this. It's just that my fear is that, is essentially like, they're gonna hide under the guise of like, well, we don't experience attraction
that's
the
for
same
sure
either.
harm. You know what I mean? Like that's not consensual because
So,
we know that's
so if I can just ask Mason directly, where is the line? Because that is where some people would say maps. They're now trying to say, that's the word.
That's not something that's
Right.
It
We know
brings
that.
harm.
We know that. But to somebody that would say, is there an objective line somewhere? And what does that look like? How can you articulate that line so that, like she's saying, or I'll have to beep that too. and those kind of things, right? Which technically are under the word queer because it's anything that strays from which is norm or stray.
That's not true because queer it's human connection. It's human relationships. And you're not going to say just because there's a developing human that's wrapped in that category. It doesn't even have to be with sexual orientation. Queer also means just like how you express yourself as a gender identity, even like the way that you participate in your community, that can sometimes be wrapped up in that umbrella term. And it seems so vague, and that's intentional. It's because it's supposed to be an umbrella term that is welcoming of so many different people. So when you're talking about things that are inherent harm, like does queer include murder? Does queer include like kidnapping? Like
No, it'll be gender and sexuality related.
Yeah, even gender sexuality related, like
Consent is important.
Consent is important. Like that's what it is at the end of the day.
So that's I guess what I would want to get from you. It's consent.
Yeah.
Right.
For us, it's consent, but morality is different for people who have a spirituality or a divinity. Yeah. And I don't know if y'all have read The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. He basically describes it as, okay, people who have divinity, mindset, morality, what's right and wrong is based on what their God says is right or wrong. But people who are more social morality, people like us, we base what's right and wrong based off of, is it hurting someone else? Mm-hmm. For instance, like if I burn an American flag, it's not hurting anyone, so we would say that's not bad. But if you are like, or if we burn a cross rather,
right.
Christians would be like, that's bad because it's going against, Christ and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But we would say it's not hurting
But what if
anyone.
someone threw a curveball at you because S&M is hurting someone, but there's consent?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right? So you have to draw the line somewhere, or should we draw the
consent.
line somewhere? That's my question to you.
I think you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah.
Consent, yeah.
Consent,
That's
okay.
it.
the very clear line, if I can jump in, is consenting adults. That's the line that if you go to Pride, if you talk to anybody in the queer community and ask, like, what is the line? And you go, consenting adults. You will hear more about consent, enthusiastic verbal consent at pride parades and queer book studies than you will at your local church. Because Michael Knowles thinks that 14-year-olds and 12-year-olds should be able to get married. No queer activist is saying that.
Or marital grape is okay.
The very clear line in the sand is between consenting adults.
Human adults.
It's also one thing, too, I'll address the crazy weirdos in the comments. They're going to say incest could be two consenting adults, blah, blah, blah. But that's just not enwrapped in that same thing because it's also potentiality for harm. So something like drunk driving, even though in every instance where someone drinks and drives, they're not going to hit somebody, we know that it increases the likelihood that harm can be done. And the same thing can be said for incest. The power dynamics between familial relationships has way more of a likelihood of creating that harm for people and removing consent, even if it is being said. So that's just something where we're not including incest. People are going to say, you don't have any objective morality to say that. We do. The potential for harm is way more increased with something like that.
I do know someone who will not condemn incest.
What?
Who will not condemn incest.
Well, then they're odd.
They're queer.
They can't sit with us.
There we go. Yeah. So I do want to, we're reaching the end of our time here, but I do want to kind of go around and ask kind of a group question and have everybody respond because I'm obsessed. This thread keeps coming up and it's literally here now. So I want to kind of ask. We were talking about how some of our family members and people that are really close to us have polar opposite views of us and when it comes to our community. And somebody was saying about drawing boundaries, and I love that conversation. I want to know how you in this room, it's a two-part question. How do you draw boundaries in your life with people that you love, that you want to keep a relationship with, but they have polar opposite views that are very dismissive of just who we are? And the second part of that question is, how important is diversity of thought to you in relationships, or is it not, and why?
Well, I don't really draw like lines for boundaries because I just kind of have this idea of what am I going to entertain? What am I willing to entertain personally? So like, I don't really talk to my biological family because they don't get me and they don't like me and they don't support me and they don't want to try to figure me out. So I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, maybe I should figure out your religion and why you think that way. I don't care. Yeah. Because you're not giving me anything. What was the second part of the question? Is diversity of thought important to you in how you cultivate your relationships? Yes or no, and why? Again, I don't care. I don't care what somebody else thinks. Like, I don't need to have another view around me as long as what I'm doing isn't hurting anybody. I don't really care about anything, honestly.
Very fair.
I totally agree, Scarlett. Like, I was hurt very bad by my family when they, didn't come to my wedding because and I was so hurt and I didn't talk to them for like years. And then after those years went by, I was like, oh my God, like, am I going to just die not talking to my brother who's like my best friend, like, and just like go my life without talking to him? And like my dad who like I just love so much. And so I was hurt very bad by the church growing up. I was K through 12 sent to Christian schooling, then Christian college, and I was just very damaged by that. And I was so angry for so long at them. Like, how could they do this? But I don't know how I've got to a place where it's just like, hey, I love who I am now and you guys can do your thing. But somehow therapy, that's how I got here. I do know how I got here. But now I talk to my dad and my brother and everyone, and we have Christmas together, but we don't talk about the things that we blatantly know we will not agree on. They're never going to believe my, sexuality is not a sin. And in the same way I was being sort of ignorant to their beliefs, if they want to believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, I have to respect that that's their belief. And you can believe that. But when it comes to my hard boundary now is if it's causing harm on me or other people, your views. And so far they haven't caused any harm. Yeah.
What college did you go to, if you don't mind me?
Covenant College. Yeah.
Biola. So
Presbyterian. Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Covenant College.
This one's a little bit tricky for me because I feel like I'm dealing with this a lot right now. So like I've said, I come from a very conservative community. I moved away a little bit from the community just in general, like after I graduated, so it was a little bit easier for me to separate. So I don't have to see everybody and whatnot, but in terms of like my family, I'm trying to figure out what I should say. I have a lot of conservative family members, and I'm not sure where the line is. I know that for some, it's taking a step back. I don't have tolerance for intolerance. So if it's like about human rights, it's really hard for me to sit in a conversation and be respectful. So I think there's been family members specifically this past year that I've had to make a fine line with, and I cannot speak to anymore because I'm being mistreated. And then there are other ones that I am still trying to find the line, and I think it's kind of tricky. Especially with family members, it's easier to step away from like an old city or an old high school or people that used to grow up with. Like, I can separate from that from a minute, but the second it is my family, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And then what was the second part?
How important is diversity of thought? Is diversity of thought important to you? Yes or no, and why?
Diversity of thought is important to me. Like I said, I think that there are certain things like trans people being eradicated that I just can't, I can't tolerate, and rights being taken away, and a promotion of a president who is actively taking away the rights of many minorities, not just trans people. So I don't know how important diversity of thought is to me right now. I think at this point, it's more about how you treat people and how you kind of where your mind is about the president a little bit. I hate to say that, but if you're supporting Donald Trump, then you're not supporting me or anybody that I care about.
I think a lot of it is like good faith. Like with my family, they would not come towards me with good faith. So that's when I knew like I need to shut it off.
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of what I'm experiencing a little bit is there are some family members that I know it's just like, no, not good faith. But then there's other people, and even like my relationship with my father, where it's like, he calls me by my chosen name. He uses my pronouns, but he supports a president that wants to eradicate me.
Sometimes I got really upset at my family for supporting, Trump, but then I have to think, okay, think about like the information and misinformation they're being fed. A lot of times I'm realizing they're not bad, hurtful, angry people. They just don't know any better.
Yeah, I don't think that they're bad or angry. I think ignorance is sometimes worse than having the knowledge, and get informed. Like, look at the studies. Go look at what's going on in the world. Don't remain ignorant about something that's literally in your face. So
if they love you, they'll do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're responsible for what we know and what we don't know because we never sought it out.
Yeah, I'm just over performative activism, pretty much, is what I'm saying.
I love it. Keelan?
Nice. What was the first question?
The first question was...
Yep, see?
Oh, boundaries.
Boundaries. Yes.
Okay.
How do you draw boundaries in your life with your loved ones? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it is kind of case by case. And I think for me, if they're willing to listen is always nice. I think my mom was really good about that. But like you said, finding common ground. Some people are a lot more tolerable than other people. And I'm kind of new to this as well. So I'm like feeling it out. But I try so hard not to be, like you said, I grew up on that side. I realize how misinformed they are as well, as I can be too. I'm guilty of that as well. But like, I get it. Like, I get that they are being fed a completely different story than I am. And so I do have a sense of like, okay, like I have to keep reminding myself that as well. The thing that hurts is the lack of urgency to learn why we think differently. Yep. I think that's what hurts the most. And so I've had some people who have, wanted to learn and ask questions. And for me, even after, if you disagree after that, okay, that's different. Like, it's a little bit easier for me to keep in touch with them. But I guess it's like if you are willing to listen to me and I can listen to you, you know what I mean? So I found like that's kind of like my happy medium. Diversity of thought. I feel like I know the other side very, very well on this topic. I would love it if they would learn it as well as I knew it. You know what I mean?
Good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
You wish they appreciated diversity of thought.
Yeah.
We studied this for 4 years. Like, maybe go to like a queer class for 4 years.
I agree in this. I would I kind of just wish they would take the same amount of time and concern, I guess, that I had too. Yeah. So. Yeah, but all for it. Like, let's learn each other's.
Love it.
That way, I feel like that's the best way to bring us together, you know, is if we can understand each other. So, and just to say, like, while we're talking about Christianity or Jesus and stuff like that, like, I, by all means, think that it's beautiful that you have a relationship with both sides. I think that's so cool that you found that happy medium. I think something that drew me to Jesus in the first place was how loving and caring he is, especially like he went out of the way to go talk to people, that woman at the well, you know what I mean? Like if you look at the route he went, like he went right to go talk to her specifically, and he washed people's feet. You know, he did everything that like just made him last. And that's just not, people who are screaming his name have not been showing that. Yet they're wondering why no one's going to church.
See, I knew meeting at a church was going to make some of y'all be preaching today. Because y'all preaching today. You get my shoulders bouncing over here. Amen, Caitlin.
There are good Christians out there.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah,
I'm not here. I like can't stand the whole like, oh, queer people are all against Christianity. That's not it at all. Like,
I mean, in fairness, though, it's hard to blame them because our community, because the representations that we see of what it is to be Christian, you know what I mean? It's just, why would you want to go and be part of that club? You know, I was an atheist for most of my life because I didn't want anything to do with it. So, I mean, my prayer for my community is that they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because so many people misrepresent who Jesus is and was and all of those things. He's love. You know, and he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And what he did when he was here was he served. He served people. He cooked his disciples breakfast. He washed their feet. He healed people.
Bro served.
Literally.
Amen.
Gilbert, can I ask you real quick?
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, your turn. Go for it.
All right. The question was like
boundaries. How do you establish boundaries with people that you love? Okay. And that maybe don't accept you or whatever in your life, that may not be okay with, who you are. And then the second part is, how important is diversity of thought in relationships for you?
Okay, so for the first one, actually I'm kind of dealing with this in my personal life, so it's kind of funny, but I think just the love has to be greater. I think you guys just have to find more common ground than differences. And I think at that point, because if you keep bringing up the thing that you don't agree on, it's obviously going to cause issues. It's going to cause conflict. So I think at that point, the love has to be greater in order for you to be around that person. For the second part, sorry, I already forgot the second part.
Diversity of thought.
Diversity of thought. I think diversity of thought is important. I think, like you said, it allows us to learn, it allows us to grow, it allows us for our beliefs to be challenged, whether that be like we decide, okay, maybe we are wrong about this, or maybe no, now I stand on business on this topic, As far as what you guys are saying about like the political, I understand how it could be hurtful with that, but I think whether it's like right wing or left wing, I heard this quote where it's like they're wings of the same bird, and there's like a bigger agenda going on, and of course like this bigger agenda wants people to have conflict within their own homes. So I think the best thing you could do is just, as long as that person is coming in good faith and loves you, I think you could just try to meet middle ground or common ground when it comes to that. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if there's real love behind it, then I think anything can happen. Because at the end of the day, they want us to fight each other. They want us to have conflict. They want us to have left.
Oh, we're absolutely pitted against each other in the media. Absolutely.
And while the higher powers, in the government, whether that be Trump, whether that be someone even over him, we don't know. We don't know the players of the game, but they want us to fight because they're like, okay, let them fight so that way we could do this over here. And they won't even pay attention because they're too busy fighting each other on this topic. And so I think at that point, the best answer we could do is love. which is ironic because, you know, at the end of the day, that's the message that should be preached at Pride in general. So I'm going to end it at that. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you, Destiny.
Yeah, I'm Pan, so it's a very easy identity to kind of blend in with whoever I'm with, especially because I've mostly had long-term relationships with people who are very femme. I present very masculine, so my identity isn't really challenged, even within my own family. I haven't really felt the need to come out to them, mostly because I know what the reaction will be, and I don't think that will really be challenged in our relationship until there becomes a point where I challenge what it is that they're expecting of me. So I think that as far as like the boundaries that I have set, I'm very different than most of my family and my broader community. The Inland Empire is not known for being a progressive haven.
It's the worst. It's the absolute worst.
But I do think that I've made a lot of great relationships with people who I disagree with. I talk about politics every single day for at least 8 hours a day. That doesn't mean that I am not friends with people who don't agree with me politically. In fact, I think it's really important that they see what a representation of somebody who they disagree with looks like. So that way they're not just kind of falling into the echo chamber. I think that there's a lot of like studies on people who leave cults or leave different environments who never engage with those people again, and it reinforces the bias of I must be right because they've fallen victim to the devil. I think just like what you said, they've accepted their identity and now the demons are taking them away from me. Like that's something that is really damaging to people who don't have that identity, but it has to be something that you're able to have the bandwidth for. If somebody's always challenging your identity, that's not somebody that you owe any time to or energy. But if it's somebody that you can have commonality with that has nothing to do with politics or your specific life experience, that might be worth investing time in. As far as like, what was the term? Diversity of thought. Oh my God. Okay. So certain thoughts there should be diversity for. I didn't grow up with any Eastern religions. I think those are really cool after learning those. I like to hear how different people go about their day, or like certain like social comfortabilities people have. I'm a pretty introverted person. I like talking with extroverts a lot. But when it comes to things like denying identity, I don't think that is within the umbrella of diversity. There's something called the paradox of tolerance. And basically, if you become tolerant of every view, you're going to get people whose primary goal is to get rid of marginalized groups. And so, like, I'm not going to be homies with or think that they should come up to the same part of the table because their ideology wants to silence people and get rid of freedom of speech. So my whole thing is like, even Michael's going to say, oh, so much for the tolerant left. They think that I'm evil and hateful. It's like, dude, because you're being hateful and evil. Like, that's the reason why. It's not because we don't think that you should be able to say what you want to say, but we're going to criticize your bullshit if you're saying bullshit.
Even saying it like with a smile and calmly doesn't make it still not very hurtful.
Well, that's why they're so successful, is because they can look you in your face and be like, you don't matter.
Yeah.
Why are you getting so mad at me?
That's like, what's so sinister kind of about it.
Yeah, thrown back.
They're professional gaslighters. That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, he's very charismatic. Like, I could see why young men especially are drawn to him. Like, there were several times where I was laughing at what he was saying, even though I wasn't really interpreting what he was saying. But I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
The confusing part was like, he does show like part of his personality, and then it's like, you're looking at me in the face of the smile and saying, I hope you get eradicated. I'm like, oh.
Well, it seemed almost satirical, like when people make fun of right-wingers, that's what it was.
It was
I was like, oh, you're one of me. Oh, wait, you're serious. Yeah.
Mason, how many Jubilee episodes have you been on?
Surrounded or in total?
Just in general.
10.
Damn. That's crazy.
Superstar over there, Mason.
I'm still not on payroll. It's crazy.
What?
That is crazy.
Get this guy some benefits.
Yeah, I know.
Seriously, give me healthcare Jubilee, please. I made you a lot of money.
Crazy. 10 episodes. Oh, my Atlanta, Georgia.
It's wild.
Oh, my goodness. And then, Kate, what do you do to establish boundaries in your life with people that disagree with you, and how important is it for you to surround yourself around people who have diversity of thought?
Yeah, I'd put it this way, especially when it comes to boundary conversations, is that we need to leave behind shoulds around this conversation and begin with a place of empowerment, which is to say that you absolutely have the right to cut people out of your life. And somebody might see it differently, and your friend might cut people out for different reasons, or your other friend might keep people in their life for other reasons. But at the end of the day, when it comes to boundaries, is you get to set them, and there's no should. And the second thing with boundaries is that, like, now doesn't mean for forever. That you can say, hey, I need to step away from this relationship for a season. I remember after I left, I kind of didn't contact a lot of people for a year. I felt more comfortable in my identity. I felt more comfortable re-engaging. And now after this debate with Michael Knowles, I went out with a friend for coffee the next day, and he's a huge Michael Knowles friend, and he's from the same religious group that we were all a part of. But that took time, and immediately after I came out, it wasn't a conversation that I would have wanted to have. So 1, you have the right to set boundaries. 2, you get to set those boundaries. And 3, those boundaries don't have to be for forever. People worry that if they take a step back, it means they'll never contact. It's like, no, you can take a step back for a time, and you can re-engage later. And now on the other side of doing a lot of internal healing, I talk to a lot of conservatives. I have a lot of people in my life that are conservatives, and I can approach those conversations with curiosity. I can understand where they come from, and but I can also hold ideas accountable. That just because somebody has a terrible idea doesn't mean they're a bad person, but it does mean we need to advocate against that. And so I can love people, I can associate with people that have terrible ideas, and I can also call them out on their bullshit, for lack of a better term, and that we can hold those ideas accountable. And when it comes to a diversity of thought, I think diversity of thought among experts is great when it comes to taxonomy of seahorses and what corporate tax rate should be at, and tensile strength at different types of materials for bridge building. I think diversity of thought there is great. But if we're coming to the table in which you want to eradicate me, I don't see why, by virtue of you having an opinion, means that we have to take it seriously or that it has to seriously enter public conversation. And I think at the end of the day, everybody has some sort of Overton window. Michael got quite triggered over talking about transubstantiation, and he'd want that cut out of dialogue. And so diversity of thought really needs to come down to, like, what particular conversation are these people credible, and is it something that we want to actually entertain? I think diversity of thought, when it leads to better ideas, is great. I think diversity of thought, when it leads to hate and taking away people's rights, is not something I care to engage in.
Great response.
Yeah, I feel like I was talking to my therapist.
It's like, do you take like clients?
That was excellent.
You want my copay?
Right?
It is a tricky balance, and I love that, not only is establishing boundaries, like you said, something that we get to do, I would even go so far as to say that it's something that we have to do because nobody else will set your boundaries for you.
Yeah.
I think about babies and how they'll crawl as fast as they can and they'll look to their parent like, can I keep going? And only until the parent says no, baby will keep going. There's something in our human condition that we will just kind of take until someone tells us, no, you can't. And I've had to learn that the hard way. I used to be such a yes person. There are people that we love and we want to engage with them, but being around them and their ideology, it's like drinking poison. It's so toxic. And I think that sometimes for the sake of that relationship, we do have to have boundaries in place. We do have to manage the time we spend together. We do have to be proactive about the topics that we will discuss and the topics that we won't discuss, because we're advocating for that relationship by what we choose to share and what we don't choose to share. Our peace is ours to guard, and it's okay. We should never feel guilt about guarding that peace.
I was about to say, I feel like there's a sense of like, oh, we have to show that, like, to these people who disagree with us, that it's actually cool to be gay. It's okay. It's normal. Like, I'm still me. I didn't change. So I feel like sometimes I have to keep people in my life for that reason. But yeah, like last year I was like, actually, I don't have to do that. That I don't have to put that responsibility on my shoulders anymore. So that was perfectly said. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doesn't mean I can't talk to them later though. So love that.
That was such a great point.
That's a good point.
Well, we have reached the end of our time together. I wanted to thank all of you for coming here and sharing your mind. We will leave, those of you that are watching at home, I will leave everybody's social media links in there so you can go follow them, go be obsessed with them, stalk them, like online only. But yeah, anybody want to have any closing thoughts or any things that you want to?
Just thank you everybody for coming. I like hearing everybody's different points of view. I love diversity of thought. It's so amazing. Thank you guys.
I love talking.
There was some nuance in this room.
There was.
Love that.
Yeah, it would be so boring if we're all like believe the same thing. We're like, yes, that's great. Next question.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for coming. If you are watching, please smash the subscribe button. Drop us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the conversation, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.
Aww.